My name is Harrison Duke, and at 72 years old, I thought I had seen the worst of humanity during my 40 years as an insurance fraud investigator. I was wrong. The devil does not always wear a cape or hold a pitchfork. Sometimes he wears a bespoke Italian suit, calls you dad, and sleeps in the bedroom next to your only daughter. One day after my wife Beatrice's funeral, the medical examiner called me. His voice was trembling. "Harrison, what I found in her blood could put your entire family in danger." Then he whispered the words that stopped my heart. "Come to my office now and do not tell your daughter a thing." When I saw the toxicology report, I wished I had died with my wife. But before I tell you how I hunted down the monster living in my house, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. Your support helps me expose the truth. The smell of lilies and stale coffee still hung heavy in the living room. The last guest had left an hour ago, taking their fake condolences and half-eaten tuna casseroles with them. The house felt massive and empty like a tomb. I sat in my recliner, the leather cold against my back, staring at the empty spot on the sofa where Beatrice used to knit while watching Wheel of Fortune. My daughter Tisha was sitting on the floor, her head resting on my knee, sobbing quietly. She looked so small, so fragile. My poor girl. She had lost her mother, and I had lost my anchor. But grief is a luxury the wealthy do not afford themselves. Gavin Thorne. My son-in-law was pacing the room. He was not crying, he was checking his watch. He stopped in front of the fireplace and picked up a framed photo of Beatrice. He looked at it for a second too long, then placed it face down on the mantelpiece. That small gesture sent a spike of irritation through my chest. "We need to talk about the future," he said. His voice was smooth like polished glass. I looked up. Gavin was 38 years old, a tech entrepreneur with a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo. Tisha worshipped him. I had tolerated him. But today his impatience was showing. "Not now, Gavin." I grumbled, my hand resting on Tisha's hair. "We just put her in the ground 3 hours ago. Have some respect." Gavin sighed, the kind of sigh a parent gives a slow child. "Harrison, I am being respectful. I am being practical. This house is too big for you now. The maintenance, the taxes, the memories haunting every corner. It is not healthy. Tisha and I have discussed it. You should sell it, immediately." Tisha stopped crying and looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Gavin is right, Daddy. You cannot stay here alone with your heart condition. We want you to come live with us. The guest wing in our estate is perfect for you. We can list this place by Monday." I looked at my daughter. She was parroting him. I knew that tone. It was Gavin's logic coming out of her mouth. "I am not an invalid, Tisha," I said, my voice rising. "I still fix my own plumbing. I still drive. This is the house your mother and I bought 40 years ago. I am not selling it so Gavin can flip it for quick cash." Gavin's jaw tightened. I saw the mask slip just for a fraction of a second, a flash of pure cold anger. Then the charming smile was back. "It is not about the money, Harrison. It is about family. We want to take care of you. Plus, with the market crashing, you need to liquidate this asset before it loses value. I have already drafted the paperwork. Just a standard power of attorney so I can handle the logistics for you while you grieve." He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. He had brought a contract to a funeral. My investigator instincts flared up. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. In my line of work, whenever someone tried to rush a signature, there was always a body buried somewhere. "I am not signing anything today," I said firmly. Gavin looked at Tisha. "Honey, tell him. Tell him how worried you are." Tisha grabbed my hand. "Please, Daddy, do it for me. I cannot sleep worrying about you being here all alone. If you love me, you will come with us." That was the dagger. He was using my love for my daughter as a weapon. I looked at Gavin. He was watching me with the eyes of a predator waiting for the prey to limp. I was about to yell at him to get out of my house when the landline phone rang. The shrill ringtone cut through the tension. Who calls a landline anymore? I struggled to stand up, my knees protesting. "Let it go to voicemail," Gavin said quickly, stepping toward the phone. "It is probably just another condolence call. I will get it." "No," I barked. I picked up the receiver. "Hello? Harrison." The voice was low, urgent. It was Elias, the county medical examiner. We had played poker together every Friday night for 20 years. "Elias," I said, rubbing my temples. "Thank you for the flowers. The service was lovely." "Stop talking, Harrison, and listen to me," Elias whispered. "Are you alone?" "No," I said, my eyes locking with Gavin's. Gavin was watching me intently, trying to gauge who was on the other end. Go to a secure line. Go to your cell. Now." I felt a cold drop of sweat roll down my spine. I hung up the landline. "Who was that?" Gavin asked casually, too casually. "Just the florist, checking on the bill," I lied. I walked toward the kitchen. "I need water. My pills." I walked into the kitchen, turned on the faucet to create white noise, and pulled my cell phone from my pocket. I dialed Elias. "Talk to me," I said. "Beatrice did not die of a heart attack, Harrison." I froze. The water ran over my hand, freezing cold. "What are you talking about?" "The report said cardiac arrest. She had a history of hypertension. I ran a full panel because something felt off." Elias said, his voice shaking. "Her potassium levels were through the roof. Lethal levels." "Harrison, someone injected her with a concentrated dose of potassium chloride. It mimics a heart attack perfectly. It stops the heart instantly and leaves almost no trace unless you are looking for it." My knees gave out. I grabbed the counter to stop from falling. "My sweet Beatrice." "Murdered. Call the police," I hissed. "Send a squad car now. Gavin is in the living room." "No," Elias shouted. "You cannot." "Why the hell not?" "Because we have no body, Harrison. Gavin had her cremated this morning, remember? He pushed the funeral home to do it immediately, claiming it was her religious wish. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I had signed those papers. I had let him burn the evidence. "Without the body, a defense attorney will tear this toxicology report apart," Elias explained. "They will say the sample was contaminated. They will say it was a lab error. If you call the police now, Gavin lawyers up and walks free. And if he walks free, Tisha is next." I looked through the kitchen doorway. I could see the back of Gavin's head. He was whispering something to Tisha, rubbing her shoulders, consoling her, or grooming her. "What do?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Find the vial," Elias said. "Potassium chloride doesn't just appear. He had to bring it into the house. He had to administer it. He probably still has the container or the syringe. Killers who use poison are arrogant, Harrison. They think they are smarter than us. They keep trophies. Find the proof. Then we nail him." I hung up the phone. My hands were trembling, but not from grief anymore. From rage. Pure, cold rage. I wiped my face. I turned off the faucet. I was not Harrison the grieving widower anymore. I was Harrison the investigator. And I had one last case to solve. I walked back into the living room. Gavin looked up. "You okay, Dad? You look pale." "I am fine," I said, forcing my voice to be steady. "You are right, Gavin. I am an old man. I should not be alone." Gavin's eyes lit up. "So you will sell." "I will think about the sale," I said. "But I will come stay with you. Tonight. I will pack a bag." "Excellent." Gavin beamed. He checked his watch again. "Look, I have to run out to the car for a second. I have some business calls to make. Tisha, help your dad pack." He walked out the front door. I watched him go. "Daddy, I am so happy," Tisha said, hugging me. "Start packing, Tisha," I said, gently pushing her toward the stairs. "I will be right up." As soon as she turned the corner, I moved to the window. The blinds were drawn, but I peered through the slats. Gavin was not making a call. He was at the back of his luxury SUV. He had popped the trunk. He looked left, then right, checking the street. It was a nervous, twitchy movement. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a black, heavy-duty trash bag. It was small, about the size of a shoebox, but heavy. Instead of walking it to the curb where my trash cans were, he shoved it deep into the spare tire compartment under the floor of his trunk. He slammed the trunk shut and looked around one more time. My heart hammered against my ribs. He did not throw it away. Elias was right. He was arrogant. Or maybe he was just sloppy. That bag did not contain trash. It contained the answer to why my wife was dead. I looked at the car keys sitting on the coffee table where Gavin had left them. I had maybe 5 minutes before he came back inside. 5 minutes to break into his car, find what was in that bag, and decide if I was going to kill him with my bare hands or send him to the electric chair. I grabbed the keys. I did not run. Old men do not run. We shuffle. But we get there just the same. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool evening air. The hunt had begun. The night air outside was cold enough to freeze the breath in my lungs, but the rage burning inside me kept me warm. I stood on the driveway, clutching Gavin's car keys in a hand that had developed a slight tremor over the years. Not from fear, but from the Parkinson's I had successfully hidden from everyone except Beatrice. The suburban street was dead silent. The kind of silence that money buys. Large houses set back from the road behind manicured hedges where neighbors minded their own business even if you were screaming. I looked at Gavin's SUV. It was a black Range Rover polished to a mirror shine, sitting in the driveway like a sleeping beast. A $90,000 car for a man who claimed his startups were changing the world. In my 40 years of investigating fraud, I learned that the shinier the car, the deeper the debt. I took a step forward and my knee clicked. I froze, waiting for the sound to echo, but the wind rustling through the oak trees covered it. I looked at the key fob in my hand. If I pressed the unlock button, the car would chirp and the headlights would flash. That would wake up the whole house. Gavin slept like a cat with one eye open. I could not risk it. I had to do this the old-fashioned way. I pressed the small release catch on the back of the fob and slid out the physical emergency key. It was a thin blade of metal, cold and sharp. I moved to the driver's side door. I inserted the key slowly. I felt the tumblers inside the lock cylinder shift. 1, 2, 3. I applied just enough torque. A soft mechanical thud echoed inside the door panel. The lock disengaged. I held my breath and pulled the handle. The door opened with a groan that sounded like a gunshot to my ears. I paused, counting to 10. No lights turned on in the house. The second-floor window where Gavin and Tisha slept remained dark. I did not get in the driver's seat. I needed the trunk. But opening the trunk from the outside would engage the hydraulic lift, which whirred loudly. I had to crawl through. I climbed into the driver's seat. The smell of the car hit me instantly. It was a mix of expensive leather and something else. Cologne. Too much of it. The smell of a man trying too hard to impress. I climbed over the center console, my joints protesting with every movement. I squeezed between the front seats into the back. I folded the rear seats down, pushing them flat to access the cargo area. It was pitch black back there. I pulled a small pen light from my pocket. I always carried one. Old habits die hard. I clicked it on, holding my hand over the lens to dim the beam to a faint glow. The trunk was empty, pristine, not a speck of dust. But I had seen him. I had seen him shove that bag into the spare tire compartment. I pulled up the floor mat. I lifted the carpeted panel, and there it was. The black trash bag. It was wedged next to the spare tire and the jack. It was twisted shut, not tied. I reached down and pulled it out. It was heavy. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that reminded me I was 72, not 32. I hoped to find a vial, a syringe, a receipt for potassium chloride. Anything that would link him to the poison. I untwisted the bag. The first thing I saw was coffee grounds. Wet, used coffee grounds. He had put them on top to mask what was underneath. I dug my hand in, ignoring the filth. My fingers brushed against paper. Thick, glossy paper. I pulled out a stack of documents stained with coffee at the edges. I shined my light on the first page. It was not a love letter. It was not a diary. It was a document I had seen 1,000 times in my career. A life insurance policy. Universal life. High premium. High payout. I scanned the details, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The insured was Beatrice Duke, my wife. The effective date was 14 days ago, just 2 weeks before her heart stopped. I flipped to the beneficiary page. I expected to see Tisha's name, or maybe a split between Tisha and me. The name on the line was typed in bold capital letters. Gavin Thorne, 100%. I looked at the payout amount, $5 million. And then I saw the rider attached to the back. The double indemnity clause. It pays out double if the death is accidental or sudden and unforeseen. A heart attack in a healthy woman with no prior cardiac history counts as unforeseen. $10 million. He did not just kill her, he bet on her death like it was a horse race. I felt bile rise in my throat. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Beatrice Duke. But the slant was wrong. Beatrice wrote her B with a large loop. This B was sharp angular. It was a forgery. A good one, but a forgery nonetheless. Or maybe he had forced her to sign it. Maybe he had drugged her even then. Suddenly everything made sense. The pieces of the puzzle I had been ignoring clicked into place. I remembered the dinner 3 months ago, the night Gavin took us to that French restaurant downtown to celebrate his company's new merger. He had ordered the most expensive wine. He had ordered the lobster. He was laughing loud, telling stories about his investors in Silicon Valley. But when the bill came, his card was declined. I remembered the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his smile faltered just for a second. He had laughed it off. He said the bank always flags large transactions for security. He used another card. Declined. In the end, I had paid. He promised to pay me back the next day. He never did. Gavin wasn't a tech genius. He was broke. He was drowning in debt. The luxury car, the designer suits, the house, it was all a house of cards. And Beatrice was his bailout. And if he was willing to kill Beatrice for $10 million, what would he do to Tisha if she started asking questions? Tisha was the only thing standing between him and that money now. If I exposed him, he would lose everything. A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous animal on earth. I took the papers and shoved them into my jacket pocket. I needed to get this to Elias. I needed to get this to the police. I reached for the door handle, ready to slip out into the night and end this nightmare. Click. The sound came from the front of the garage. It was the sound of the deadbolt on the door connecting the house to the garage unlocking. I froze. The door swung open. A beam of bright yellow light from the hallway sliced through the darkness of the garage. I was trapped in the back of the SUV. If I moved, he would see me. If I stayed, he would see me. Heavy footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Slippers. The shuffling sound of expensive leather slippers. Who is out there? Gavin's voice. It wasn't the smooth, charming voice he used at the funeral. It was low, guttural, and edged with paranoia. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't fight him. He was 38 and fit. I was an old man with a pocket full of stolen evidence. If he found me now, he would kill me right here. He would say I was an intruder. He would say I attacked him. Self-defense. The footsteps got closer. He was walking toward the car. I did the only thing I could do, the only thing my aging body would allow. I silently unlatched the passenger door on the side facing away from him. I let gravity help me. I slid out of the car feet first, pressing my body flat against the cold concrete floor. I rolled under the chassis of the SUV just as the overhead garage lights flickered on. The garage flooded with fluorescent light. From my vantage point under the car, I could see everything in a narrow strip. I saw the oil stains on the concrete. I saw the tire of the Range Rover inches from my face. And then I saw his feet. He was wearing his velvet loafers. He stopped right next to the driver's door. He was so close I could have reached out and untied his shoes. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle the sound of my own breathing. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could feel the vibrations through the floor. Did I lock it? I heard him mutter to himself. He pulled the door handle. It opened. I had forgotten to lock it back. I squeezed my eyes shut. This was it. This was how I died. Under a car in my own daughter's garage. He leaned in. I saw the suspension of the car dip under his weight. He was checking the center console. He was checking the glove box. Then he moved to the back. He opened the trunk. I heard the rustle of the plastic bag. He was checking the trash bag. There was a long silence, a silence that stretched for eternity. He was looking for the papers that were currently burning a hole in my jacket pocket pressed against the concrete. "Where is it?" he hissed. The voice was pure venom. He slammed the trunk shut. The car shook. Dust fell from the undercarriage into my eyes, but I didn't blink. He started pacing, back and forth, his slippers scuffing the floor. "He knows," he whispered. "The old man knows." He walked toward the garage door switch. I held my breath. If he opened the garage door, he would see me lying under the car from the street. If he walked around the car, he would see my legs sticking out. Instead, he walked back to the door leading to the house. "Tisha," he called out. His voice was suddenly bright and cheerful again. "Tisha, honey, are you awake? I think we need to check on your dad. I have a bad feeling." He stepped back into the house and closed the door. The lock clicked. I let out a breath that was half sob, half gasp. He wasn't going to sleep. He was coming for me. He was going to the guest room to check if I was in bed, and when he found my bed empty, he would know exactly where I was. I scrambled out from under the car, my clothes covered in grease and dust. I didn't care about the pain in my knees anymore. I had to get out. I had to warn Tisha. But first I had to survive the next 10 minutes. I ran toward the side door of the garage into the night. But as I stepped onto the grass, I saw a shadow move in the window upstairs. Gavin was looking down at the driveway, and he was smiling. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling fan slicing through the darkness. The insurance papers were hidden inside the lining of my old suitcase, but they burned in my mind like a branding iron. My instinct screamed at me to run, to grab Tisha and drag her out of that house, to drive to the nearest police station and scream until someone listened. But 40 years in the insurance game had taught me that the truth does not matter in court. Only what you can prove matters. If I showed the police the policy, Gavin would claim Beatrice wanted to surprise him. If I mentioned the potassium chloride, he would say the medical examiner made a mistake. He would hire a shark lawyer and sue the county for emotional distress. He would walk free. And Tisha would remain in his clutches, convinced her father was a senile old man trying to ruin her marriage. No, I could not fight him from the outside. I had to become the thing he feared most. I had to become the burden he could not get rid of. I had to be the Trojan horse. The next morning, the smell of bacon filled the kitchen, but my stomach turned at the sight of Gavin flipping pancakes. He was whistling. The happy, grieving husband. I sat down at the table. Tisha poured me coffee, her eyes anxious. I have been thinking, I said, my voice raspy. You were right, Gavin. Gavin stopped whistling. He turned around, spatula in hand. Right about what, Harrison? About the house, I said, looking down at my plate. It is too big. Too many memories. I cannot stay here alone. Tisha gasped. She dropped the milk carton. Really, Daddy? You mean it? I nodded slowly. I will sell, and I will take you up on your offer. I want to move in with you, just until I get back on my feet. Gavin's smile was wide, but it did not reach his eyes. His eyes were calculating. He was wondering why I had changed my mind so fast. He was wondering if I had seen him in the garage. But greed is a powerful blinder. The thought of getting his hands on the proceeds from my house sale was too tempting. That is wonderful news, Harrison, Gavin said, walking over and squeezing my shoulder. His grip was a little too tight. We will have the real estate agent over by noon. You can pack today. We will move you in tonight. That night, I left the home I had shared with Beatrice for 40 years. I left the garden she planted. I left the height marks of Tisha on the doorframe. I packed only 2 suitcases, my clothes, my medication, and the hidden insurance papers. Gavin's house was a fortress. It was a modern glass and steel monstrosity in the hills, isolated from the neighbors by high walls and dense pine trees. It was beautiful and cold. As we walked through the front door, the heavy electronic lock beeped and clicked shut behind us. It sounded like a prison cell closing. Welcome home, Tisha said, beaming. She led me to the guest suite on the first floor. It was spacious but sterile. White walls, minimal furniture, no personality. I started unpacking. I placed Beatrice's photo on the nightstand. I needed her watching over me. Suddenly the door opened. Gavin walked in. He was not smiling anymore. Settling in, okay? He asked. Fine, I said. Good. He held out his hand. I need your phone, Harrison. I froze. My phone was my lifeline. It was my only link to Elias, my only way to call for help. Why, I asked, clutching the device in my pocket. Gavin sighed, shaking his head. I spoke to Dr. Sterling today. He said your blood pressure is critically high. He is worried about the stress. And he mentioned that the electromagnetic radiation from older cell phones can interfere with your heart medication. We cannot take that risk. It was a lie, a clumsy, stupid lie. But it was not about the lie, it was about dominance. I am 72, Gavin, not 7. I need my phone. Tisha appeared in the doorway behind him. Daddy, please listen to Gavin. He is just trying to protect you. We have a landline in the kitchen if you really need to call someone. But you need to disconnect. You need to rest. He had already turned her against me. If I fought him now, I would look like the stubborn aggressor. I had to play the long game. I had to play the victim. I pulled the phone out. My hand trembled not from age, but from the effort of not punching him in the throat. Fine, I said, if it makes Tisha happy. I placed the phone in his open palm. He closed his fingers around it. It is for the best, he said. Sleep well, old man. He closed the door. I heard the lock click from the outside. He had locked me in my own room. I waited until the house was silent. I needed to inspect my cage. I needed to find a way out. I moved to the window, sealed. High-impact hurricane-proof glass. I tried the handle. Locked. I turned back to the room. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. The same feeling I had in the garage. I was being watched. I scanned the room. The smoke detector on the ceiling blinked red, standard. But then I saw another faint light coming from the bookshelf. Nestled between 2 generic hardback books was a small black circle. A lens. I walked closer, pretending to admire the books. It was a high-definition camera. Audio and video. I moved to the lamp in the corner, another one hidden in the base. I went to the vent, a microphone. My blood ran cold. This was not a guest room. This was an observation tank. Gavin wasn't just isolating me, he was studying me. He wanted to know if I knew. He was waiting for me to slip up, to talk to myself, to reveal where I hid the papers. If I panicked, he would see it. If I searched for a weapon, he would see it. I needed a blind spot. I grabbed my toiletry bag and walked into the ensuite bathroom. I closed the door and turned on the shower. I turned on the sink faucet. I turned on the exhaust fan. I scanned the bathroom. Tiles, mirrors, no bookshelves, no suspicious vents. I dropped to my knees and checked under the sink. Nothing. I checked the light fixture. Nothing. The bathroom was clean. It was the only place in the house where his electronic eyes could not reach. I sat on the cold tile floor, the steam from the shower filling the room. I was trapped, unarmed, cut off from the world, living with a murderer who was watching my every move on a monitor in the other room. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. Gavin thought he had captured a helpless mouse. He was about to find out he had locked himself in with a rat, and rats know how to chew through anything. Days turned into a week and the house became a silent battlefield. I was the prisoner of war and Gavin was the warden. He went to work every morning in his pristine suit, leaving me trapped behind the high walls and electronic locks. He thought he had neutralized me. He thought taking my phone and isolating me from my friends had broken my spirit. But he made one critical mistake. He forgot that even the most secure prison has mice. And in this house, the mouse was named Elena. Elena was the housekeeper. She was a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes and hands roughened by years of scrubbing other people's floors. She moved through the house like a ghost. She never spoke unless spoken to. She never looked Gavin in the eye. When he entered a room, she would shrink into the corner, making herself as small as possible. I knew that body language. I'd seen it in the victims of domestic abuse I interviewed back in the 90s. Elena was terrified. I tried to talk to her. I needed an ally. I needed someone who could smuggle a letter out to Elias or at least lend me a phone for 2 minutes. But every time I approached her, she would flinch. "Good morning, Elena," I would say, trying to sound harmless. She would just nod, keeping her eyes on the floor, and hurry away to the laundry room. She treated me like I was part of the furniture, or worse, like I was a spy for Gavin. But I kept watching her. I spent my days sitting in the living room pretending to read old magazines while my eyes followed her every move. I noticed she was nervous. She was always checking the cameras. She would clean the same spot on the counter 3 times, and she was hiding something. It was Thursday afternoon. The sky was gray and heavy with rain. Tisha was due home from the clinic in an hour. Gavin was supposedly at a board meeting, but I knew better than to trust his schedule. I was in the kitchen pouring myself a glass of water. Elena was at the kitchen island preparing Tisha's afternoon smoothie. It was a ritual. Gavin insisted Tisha drink a green detox juice every day as soon as she got home. He said it was for her skin and her energy levels. Tisha hated the taste, but she drank it because she wanted to please him. I stood by the sink sipping my water, watching Elena's back. She was tense. Her shoulders were hunched up to her ears. She reached into the pocket of her apron. She pulled out a small white envelope. It was not a sugar packet. It was not a protein powder sachet. It was a plain, unmarked envelope. She looked up at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. She shifted her body, trying to block the lens with her shoulder. Then she opened the envelope and dumped a fine white powder into the blender with the kale and spinach. My heart stopped. The image of the medical examiner's report flashed in my mind. Potassium chloride, white powder, soluble, deadly. She was poisoning my daughter. Rage gave me a speed I did not know I still possessed. I dropped my water glass. It shattered on the floor, but I didn't care. I lunged across the kitchen. Before Elena could turn on the blender, I grabbed her wrist. "What are you doing?" I roared. Elena screamed. She tried to pull away, but I held on tight. The adrenaline of a father protecting his child made my grip like iron. "You are poisoning her," I shouted, shaking her arm. "What is that? Is that what you gave my wife? Did he make you kill Beatrice too?" Elena's eyes went wide with terror. She started crying. No, please, Senor Harrison. It is not poison. "Do not lie to me," I yelled. "I saw you. I saw the powder." I grabbed the blender jug, ready to hurl it against the wall to save the evidence. "Please," Elena sobbed, collapsing onto her knees. "She did not fight me. She just crumbled. Please do not tell him. He will deport me. He will hurt my son. Tell me what it is," I demanded, looming over her. "It is medicine," she wept. "Just medicine." "What kind of medicine?" "Diane 35, she whispered. "Birth control." I froze. I looked at the sobbing woman on the floor, then at the green sludge in the blender. Birth control, I repeated. Yes. Elena nodded, wiping her nose with her apron. He makes me crush them. 4 pills every day. He makes me put them in her drink. He says if she tastes them, he will fire me. He said he will call immigration on my son. I let go of her wrist. My mind was racing. Tisha had been trying to get pregnant for 2 years. I had seen her cry after every negative test. She blamed herself. She thought she was infertile. She went to specialists. She took hormones. She prayed. And all this time her loving husband was drugging her with high-dose contraceptives hidden in a health drink. Why, I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Why does he not want a baby? Elena shook her head, still trembling. I do not know. He just says no baby. Never a baby. He says a baby ruins everything. I helped Elena up. She was shaking like a leaf. You cannot tell him, she pleaded, grabbing my hand. Please, I have nowhere else to go. I looked at the camera in the corner. It had no audio unless zoomed in. To Gavin watching the feed later, it would just look like I startled her and she dropped something. Clean this up, I said, pointing to the shattered glass. And make the drink. Do exactly what he told you. But senor, do it, I commanded. If you stop now, he will know I know. And then we are both dead. Elena nodded, wiping her tears, and turned back to the blender. I walked back to my room, my legs feeling heavy. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photo of Beatrice. Why? Why would a man desperate for money not want a child? A child anchors a marriage. A child guarantees financial support for 18 years, unless he wasn't planning on staying married for 18 years. If Tisha had a child and then died, the inheritance laws would change. The estate would not go entirely to the husband. A portion would be held in trust for the child. The grandparents or guardians would get involved. It would be messy. It would be scrutinized. But if Tisha died childless and her parents were dead or incapacitated, Gavin Thorne would be the sole heir to everything. The house, the life insurance, the savings. He didn't just want her money. He wanted a clean sweep. I heard the front door open. I heard Tisha's voice calling out cheerfully. Honey, I am home. Oh, Elena, thank you for my smoothie. You are an angel. I heard the blender whir. I heard my daughter drinking the poison that was killing her dreams. I closed my eyes. Gavin wasn't just a murderer. He was a thief of life. He had stolen Beatrice. He was stealing Tisha's future children, and soon he would come for Tisha herself. But now I had a witness. A terrified, reluctant witness, but a witness nonetheless. I looked at the vent on the wall. You are watching me. Gavin, aren't you? You think you are the only one with secrets. I lay back on the pillow and waited for the darkness. The game had just changed. I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore. I was fighting for a generation that hadn't even been born yet. And God help him when I got my hands on him. The descent into hell did not happen with fire and brimstone. It happened with a slow, suffocating fog that settled over my daughter. Over the next 3 days, I watched Tisha fade. My vibrant, brilliant girl who could debug complex code in her sleep began to unravel. She started forgetting simple things. She left the stove on. She lost her keys 3 times in one afternoon. She would start a sentence and then drift off, staring blankly at the wall as if listening to a sound only she could hear. And Gavin was there for every moment of it. Not to help her, but to document her fall. He played the role of the saint perfectly. When Tisha dropped a coffee mug, shattering it on the tile, he didn't get angry. He spoke to her in that soft, condescending tone one uses with a toddler. Oh, honey, not again. You're getting so clumsy lately. Why don't you go lie down and let the adults handle this? The adults. He was infantilizing her. He was rewriting her reality. And the terrifying part was that Tisha was believing him. She would look at her trembling hands and apologize profusely, tears welling in her eyes. I am sorry, she would whisper. I do not know what is wrong with me. I feel so heavy. I knew what was wrong with her. It was the green smoothies. It was the gaslighting. It was the systematic dismantling of her psyche. But I could not scream. Not yet. I was the crazy old man in the guest room. If I accused him now, he would say I was projecting my grief. He would say dementia runs in the family. On Friday evening, Gavin came home early. He wasn't alone. He brought a man with him. A man in a bespoke gray suit carrying a leather medical bag. Tisha, honey, Gavin called out. Come to the living room. I brought Dr. Sterling to see you. I was sitting in the armchair in the corner, invisible as usual. I watched them enter. Dr. Sterling was not Tisha's regular physician. He was younger, slicker. He had the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. I recognized the type immediately. In my insurance days, we called them signature doctors, the kind of doctors who signed whiplash claims for cash without ever touching the patient. Gavin sat Tisha down on the sofa. She looked pale, her skin almost translucent. I am fine, Gavin, Tisha protested weakly. I am just tired. You are not fine, baby, Gavin said, stroking her hair. You forgot your own phone number today. You were wandering around the garden looking for your mother. I am worried. We are all worried. Even your dad is worried, right, Harrison? He turned to me, challenging me to disagree. If I said she was fine, I would look negligent. If I agreed, I was playing into his hand. I am watching her close, I said neutrally. Dr. Sterling opened his bag. He took Tisha's blood pressure. He shone a light in her eyes. He asked her 3 questions. How are you sleeping? Do you feel anxious? Do you miss your mother? Of course she missed her mother. We buried her 10 days ago. Sterling stood up and nodded gravely at Gavin. It is exactly what we discussed on the phone. Acute grief-induced depression with dissociative episodes. Her body is shutting down from the trauma. She is a danger to herself. It was a script, a rehearsed performance. What do we do? Gavin asked, feigning desperation. She needs rest, Sterling said, pulling a prescription pad from his pocket. Deep chemical rest. I am prescribing haloperidol and a high dose of benzodiazepines. It will calm her mind. She needs to take 2 pills every night. Do not let her skip a dose. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Haloperidol. That was an antipsychotic. Combined with benzos, it would turn her into a zombie. She wouldn't just be tired. She would be compliant. She would sign anything he put in front of her. She would be too sedated to fight back when he finally decided to push her down the stairs or drown her in the bathtub. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Beatrice. 2 months before Beatrice died, she had complained of anxiety. Gavin had recommended a specialist, a friend of his. Beatrice started taking pills, yellow capsules. She became lethargic. She stopped gardening. She stopped asking questions about Gavin's business loans. I had thought it was just old age. I had been a fool. He was using the exact same playbook. I stood up. My knees popped. Is that necessary? Doctor, I asked, my voice steady. Those are strong drugs for a grieving woman. Maybe she just needs therapy. Maybe she just needs fresh air. Dr. Sterling looked at me with a sneer. He adjusted his silk tie. And you are a medical professional, Mr. Duke. No, I said. I am her father. Then let the doctors do their job, old man. Gavin cut in, his voice sharp. You want her to get better, don't you? Or do you want her to have a breakdown? Tisha looked at me, her eyes pleading. Daddy, please. I just want the noise in my head to stop. I trust Gavin. I sat back down. I had to lose this battle to win the war. Fine, I said. Gavin went to the pharmacy that same evening. He came back with an orange bottle. He stood in the kitchen and poured a glass of water. He took out 2 white oval pills. Here, baby, he said, handing them to Tisha. Drink up. It will make the pain go away. I watched my daughter swallow the chemical handcuffs. Within 30 minutes, she was slurring her words. Within an hour, she was unconscious on the sofa. Gavin carried her upstairs like a rag doll. He looked at me as he passed. Don't wait up, Harrison, he said. I waited. I waited until the grandfather clock in the hall chimed 2 in the morning. The house was silent. The cameras were blinking their red eyes in the darkness. I knew Gavin's routine. He was a narcissist. He slept soundly, believing he was untouchable. I crept out of my room. I was barefoot. I moved along the wall, avoiding the squeaky floorboards I had mapped out over the last few days. I wasn't heading to the front door. I was heading to the kitchen first. I opened the pantry. On the top shelf behind the protein powder was a bottle of vitamin B12 supplements I had bought for myself. They were white oval pills, almost identical to the sedatives. I poured a handful into a napkin. Then I went upstairs. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. I pushed it open inch by inch. The room smelled of lavender and sickness. Tisha was asleep on her side, breathing heavily. Gavin was on the other side, snoring softly. The orange bottle was on Tisha's nightstand. This was the most dangerous moment of my life. If Gavin woke up now, there was no explanation. He would see the pills in my hand. He would know. I crept to the side of the bed. I looked at Tisha. Her face was slack. Drool was pooling on the pillow. She looked drugged, not rested. I reached for the orange bottle. My hand shook. I took a breath and steadied it. I picked it up. It rattled slightly. I froze. Gavin shifted in the bed. He grunted and rolled over. I stood paralyzed, holding my breath, counting the beats of my racing heart. 1, 2, 3. His breathing evened out again. I unscrewed the cap. I dumped the sedatives into my left pocket. I poured the vitamins from the napkin into the bottle. I screwed the cap back on. I placed the bottle back exactly where it was. I took the sedatives, the evidence, and secured them in my pocket. Now I could send these to Elias. Now we could prove what he was giving her. I turned to leave. I felt a surge of triumph. I had done it. I reached the doorway. I stepped into the hall. "Going somewhere, Harrison." The voice came from the shadows at the top of the stairs. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I spun around. Gavin wasn't in bed. The lump under the duvet was a pillow. Gavin was standing in the dark, leaning against the wall of the hallway. He was wearing his silk robe. His arms were crossed. His eyes were adjusting to the dark, reflecting the moonlight like a cat. How long had he been standing there? Had he seen me in the room? Had he seen the swap? I couldn't sleep. I said, my voice sounding too loud in the silence. I heard a noise. I wanted to check on Tisha. Gavin didn't move. He didn't blink. "You care about her a lot, don't you?" he asked. It wasn't a question. It was an observation. "She is my daughter," I said, clutching the pills in my pocket. My hand was sweating. Gavin took a step forward. He loomed over me. He was taller, younger, stronger. "You know, Harrison, old people get confused at night. They wander. They fall down stairs. They mistake doors for windows. It happens all the time." It was a threat. A clear, naked threat. I gripped the banister. "I am careful, Gavin. I watch where I step." Gavin smiled. A cold, lifeless smile. "See that you do. Because Tisha needs stability right now. She doesn't need her father having a tragic accident. That would just break her heart completely. And we wouldn't want that." He reached out and patted my cheek. His hand was cold. "Go to bed, Harrison, before you get hurt." He turned and walked into the bedroom, closing the door firmly behind him. I stood there in the dark, shivering. He suspected. He knew I was up to something. The clock was ticking. I had the pills, but I had lost the element of surprise. I went back to my room and hid the sedatives inside my hollowed-out shaving cream can. I sat on the bed and stared at the camera lens on the bookshelf. "You think you scared me, Gavin," I whispered to the blinking red light. "You just made me dangerous. Tomorrow I would find a way to get these pills to Elias, even if I had to burn this house down to do it." The war had moved from the shadows into the light, and one of us wasn't going to make it out alive. Saturday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The sun was shining through the high windows of the dining room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Tisha was sitting at the head of the table, nursing a cup of herbal tea. Thanks to the vitamins I had swapped, she looked slightly more alert today. The gray pallor of her skin had receded just a fraction, and her eyes held a spark of the intelligence I remembered. But Gavin noticed it too. I saw him watching her over the rim of his coffee mug. He was calculating. If Tisha got her strength back, she might start asking questions about the bank accounts or the sudden urge to sell her childhood home. He needed to accelerate his timeline, and that meant he needed to remove the obstacle standing in his way. Me. The attack did not begin with a shout. It began with a whisper of concern. "Dad," Gavin said, putting down his mug with a soft clink. "Tisha and I were talking last night. We are worried about you." I buttered my toast, keeping my hand steady. "Worried about what, Gavin?" "About your memory," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You have been acting strange lately, Harrison. Talking to people who are not there, wandering the halls at night." I looked at Tisha. She was biting her lip, looking down at the table. "I am not wandering," I said calmly. "I am an old man with insomnia, and I do not talk to ghosts." Gavin sighed. He reached under the table and pulled something out. It was my leather wallet. "I found this in the freezer this morning," he said, placing it gently on the placemat, next to the frozen peas. "Do you remember putting it there, Harrison?" My blood ran cold. I had left my wallet on the nightstand. I remembered distinctly because I had checked it for the business card of my old lawyer before going to sleep. Gavin had entered my room while I slept. He had taken it, and he had planted it. I did not put it there, I said, my voice tightening. You know I did not. Daddy, please, Tisha whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Gavin showed me. It was right there. Why would you put your wallet in the freezer? I looked at my daughter. The drugs had left her suggestible. She trusted her husband, and why wouldn't she? To her, he was the rock holding her together after her mother's death. To her, I was just the grieving father falling apart. He put it there, Tisha, I said, pointing a trembling finger at Gavin. He is trying to make me look crazy. Gavin shook his head sadly. See, Tisha. Paranoia. Classic early-stage symptom. Dr. Sterling warned us about this. Aggression. Blaming others for his own confusion. Stop it, I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. The silverware rattled. Tisha flinched. She looked at me with fear, actual fear. That look cut deeper than any knife Gavin could have wielded. My little girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee was now afraid of me. I realized my mistake instantly. I had lost my temper. I had given him exactly the reaction he wanted. I am sorry, Tisha, I said, lowering my voice. I am just tired. Gavin stood up. Why don't you go rest in the living room, Harrison? Elena is dusting in there. Maybe she can keep an eye on you while Tisha and I finish breakfast. I walked into the living room, my heart pounding against my ribs. I felt trapped. He was gaslighting me systematically. He was rewriting my reality in front of my daughter's eyes. I sat on the sofa. Elena was polishing the grand piano. She looked at me quickly, then looked away. She knew. She knew everything. But she was too terrified to speak. 10 minutes later, Gavin came in. He was holding a blue vase. It was a Ming vase replica. Expensive. Tisha loved it. He walked over to where I was sitting. He stood with his back to the hallway, blocking Tisha's view if she came in. You are making this too hard on yourself, old man, he whispered. His face was a mask of cold indifference. Just sign the papers. Go to the home. Live out your last few years in peace. I looked up at him. I will never let you have her money, I hissed, and I will never let you hurt her. Gavin smiled. Who is going to believe you? The man who puts his wallet in the freezer. He lifted the vase high above his head. Then he threw it. Not at me. He threw it at the wall just inches from my head. Crash! The porcelain shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound was like a bomb going off in the quiet house. Then Gavin did something that chilled me to the bone. He grabbed my wrist and dug his fingernails into my skin, drawing blood. Then he let go and stumbled back, falling onto the floor just as Tisha ran into the room. Daddy, stop! Tisha screamed. Gavin was on the floor holding his arm, grimacing in pain. He threw it, Tisha. He just picked it up and threw it at me. He was screaming about the money. He thinks I am stealing from him. I sat there on the sofa, stunned. My hand was still raised from where he had grabbed it. To Tisha, it looked like I had just thrown the projectile. No, I whispered. Tisha, no. Tisha looked at the shattered vase. She looked at her husband on the floor. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were not just fearful anymore. They were filled with a profound, heartbreaking pity. I can't do this anymore, Gavin, Tisha sobbed. I can't. He is dangerous. What if he hurts himself? What if he hurts you? Gavin stood up, brushing off his pants. He walked over to Tisha and wrapped his arms around her. He looked at me over her shoulder. His eyes were dead. It is okay, baby, he cooed. It is not his fault. It is the disease. The Alzheimer's is progressing faster than we thought, but we have to make a decision. For his safety, and for ours. Tisha buried her face in his chest. Do it, she cried. Call the place. I sat frozen. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and tell her to wake up, but I knew it was useless. Any outburst now would only seal my fate. I had been outplayed. He had turned my sanctuary into a courtroom, and he was the judge, jury, and executioner. That evening, the brochure appeared on the coffee table. Sunnyvale Memory Care Facility. It looked nice on paper. Green lawns, smiling nurses. But I knew what it was. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. A place where old people went to die quietly while their children spent their inheritance. Gavin sat down opposite me. Tisha was upstairs, resting again, exhausted from the trauma of the morning. They have a bed open next Monday, Gavin said, casually tapping the brochure. It is a secure unit. Keypad entry. No unauthorized exits. You will be safe there, Harrison. Next Monday. Today was Monday. I had 7 days. 7 days before I was locked away in a facility where my words would be dismissed as the ramblings of a demented old man. 7 days before I lost all access to the house, to the evidence, to Tisha. 7 days until Tisha had her accident. I looked at Gavin. He was pouring himself a glass of scotch. He looked victorious. He thought the game was over. He thought checkmate was inevitable. But he forgot one thing. A man with nothing to lose is a man with no fear. I picked up the brochure. I studied the picture of the smiling nurse. "Okay," I said softly. Gavin paused, glass halfway to his lips. "Okay. I am tired, Gavin," I said, letting my shoulders slump. "I am confused. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am losing my mind. The vase, I don't remember throwing it, but if Tisha saw it—" I let the sentence trail off. I saw the tension leave Gavin's shoulders. He bought it. He thought he had broken me. "Good," he said, taking a sip. "It is for the best." He didn't know that under the table my hand was clenched into a fist so tight my knuckles were white. He didn't know that my mind was sharper than it had been in 20 years. He had given me a deadline, and deadlines focus the mind like nothing else. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on my cane, playing the part. "I am going to bed," I said. "Sleep well," Harrison Gavin said. "Enjoy your last week in a real bed." I walked to my room. I closed the door. I didn't turn on the light. I went to the closet and pulled out the old shoe box where I kept my shoe polishing kit. I opened it. Inside, nestled between the brushes and the black polish, was the Nokia phone I had found in the basement. I had charged it using the spliced wires of the lamp while Gavin was at work. It had 2 bars of battery. I sat on the floor in the corner of the room, the one blind spot I had discovered earlier that day where the camera angle was blocked by the high back of the wardrobe. I powered it on. The screen glowed faint green in the darkness. 7 days. I needed help. I needed backup. And I knew exactly who to call. I typed the message with clumsy thumbs, my heart racing. Subject: Bluebeard. Target: Gavin Thorne. Status: red. Need full background check. Deep dive. Use the old codes. I hit send. I watched the little envelope icon spin. Then it disappeared. Message sent. I turned off the phone and hid it back in the shoebox. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The camera blinked at me. "Enjoy your victory lap, Gavin," I thought, because next week one of us is going to that hospital, and it won't be me. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, listening to the silence of the house. It was a heavy, oppressive silence, broken only by the hum of the central air conditioning and the occasional settle of the foundation. My clock was ticking. 7 days. That was the sentence Gavin had handed down. 7 days until I was shipped off to Sunnyvale, where my accusations would be treated with medication instead of investigation. I needed a weapon. But in this digital fortress, my weapon wasn't a gun or a knife. It was information, and to get information, I needed a line to the outside world. I had checked my closet earlier, hoping to find Tisha's old college box where she kept her keepsakes. It was empty. Then I remembered. Last year, when Gavin did his spring cleaning purge, he had banished everything that didn't fit his minimalist aesthetic to the basement. The basement. The one place in the house the cameras didn't cover because the Wi-Fi signal didn't reach down there. It was a concrete bunker, and somewhere in that bunker was a box labeled Class of 2005. Inside that box was a brick, a Nokia 3310, the phone Tisha used before smartphones took over our lives. If it was still there, it was my only hope. I opened my bedroom door. The hallway was bathed in the pale blue light of the moon coming through the skylight. I looked at the camera above the stairs. The red light was steady. It wasn't panning. It was fixed on the front door. If I hugged the wall and moved low, I might be able to slip under its field of view. I dropped to my hands and knees. My joints screamed in protest. Arthritis is a cruel companion for a spy. I crawled along the baseboards, dragging my 72-year-old body inch by painful inch. I felt like a soldier in a trench war, but my enemy wasn't across a field. He was sleeping in the master bedroom upstairs. I reached the door to the basement. It was locked. Of course it was locked. Gavin locked everything. But this was an interior door. The lock was a simple privacy latch. I pulled a bobby pin from my pocket, one I had swiped from the bathroom floor earlier. I wasn't a master thief, but I had opened enough locked filing cabinets in my career to know the trick. I jiggled the pin. Twist, push, click. The door opened with a groan. I froze, waiting for the alarm, waiting for Gavin's footsteps. Silence. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. I was enveloped in absolute darkness. The air down here was different. It was stale and cold, smelling of damp concrete and forgotten memories. I didn't dare turn on the light. The switch might be connected to the smart home system. Instead, I pulled out my small pen light and clamped it between my teeth. The thin beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a graveyard of cardboard boxes and plastic bins stacked to the ceiling. This was Gavin's discard pile. I saw Tisha's painting supplies. I saw the ugly sweater Beatrice had knitted for him 3 Christmases ago shoved into a bin labeled donations. Seeing that sweater treated like trash made my blood boil. But I had to focus. Class of 2005. I started digging. I moved heavy boxes, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Dust motes danced in the beam of my light, clogging my throat. I wanted to cough, but I swallowed it down. Silence was my shield. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Panic started to set in. What if he threw it away? What if the battery had corroded and destroyed the phone? Then I saw it. A battered cardboard box under a stack of old magazines. The writing on the side was Tisha's flowery handwriting. College memories. I tore the tape off. I threw aside old textbooks and a dried corsage from a prom. My hand brushed against something hard and cold. I pulled it out. It was blue. It was clunky. And to me, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The Nokia. I pressed the power button. Nothing. I pressed it again, holding it down. Nothing. The screen remained a dead, gray square. I cursed under my breath. Of course it was dead. It had been sitting in a box for 15 years. I frantically dug through the rest of the box, looking for the charger. I threw papers and photos onto the floor. No charger. I sat back on my heels, defeated. I had the phone, but it was just a paperweight. I was holding a lifeline that was cut. I looked around the basement in desperation. My light beam fell on an old nightlight plugged into a dusty outlet near the water heater. It was one of those cheap incandescent ones. I looked at the phone. I popped the back cover off. I looked at the battery terminals. 3 gold pins. Positive, negative, ground. I looked at the nightlight. A cord. Copper wires inside rubber insulation. I wasn't an electrician, but I was a mechanic before I was an investigator. I knew the principles. Direct current, voltage. If I could bridge the connection, I might get enough juice to turn it on for just a minute. Just enough to send one text. It was a risk, a huge risk. If I crossed the wires wrong, I could blow the battery or start a fire. I crawled over to the outlet. I unplugged the nightlight. I used the small file on my nail clippers to saw through the insulation of the cord. It took forever. My hands were shaking and my eyes were straining in the dim light. Finally, I exposed 2 strands of copper wire. I needed a power source. The outlet was AC. The phone needed DC. Plugging it directly into the wall would fry it instantly. I looked around wildly. I needed a battery, any battery. Then I saw it. A child's toy, a remote control car that must have been a gift for a nephew or cousin that never got used. I flipped it over. The battery compartment was screwed shut. I used the nail file again, grinding until the screw gave way. 4 AA batteries. I pulled them out. I lined them up in a series on the concrete floor, taping them together with a strip of packing tape from one of the boxes. Positive to negative, creating a makeshift 6-volt power pack. I pressed the exposed wires of the nightlight cord to the ends of my battery chain. Then I touched the other ends to the gold pins on the back of the Nokia battery. "Hold on," I whispered. "Just hold on." I held the wires in place with my trembling fingers. The copper got hot. It burned my skin. But I didn't let go. 1 minute, 2 minutes. I reassembled the phone, shoving the battery back in. I prayed to whatever God watches over desperate fathers. I pressed the power button. A faint blue light flickered. Then the image of 2 hands clasping appeared. The Nokia startup screen. I almost cried. I waited for it to boot. The signal bars appeared. 1 bar, then 2. The old network was still alive. I went to messages. I didn't have Elias's number memorized, but I had written it on the inside of my belt with a marker days ago for this exact moment. I typed. The T9 keypad was clumsy and loud. Click, click, click. Every button press sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Elias. It is Harrison. Check Gavin Thorne background. Deep dive. Use alias Julian S. He is not who he says. He killed B. Tisha is next. Urgent. I hit send. Sending. The little envelope animation spun. My heart was pounding in my throat. Message sent. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I quickly pulled the battery out of the phone to kill the signal immediately so it couldn't be tracked. I had done it. The arrow was in the air. I started to gather the wires in the toy car to hide the evidence of my experiment. Creak. The sound came from above. It was the sound of a footstep on the hardwood floor of the hallway, directly above the basement door. I froze, my hand hovering over the dismantled remote control car. Creak. Another step. Closer this time. Then the sound of the handle on the basement door turning. The latch clicked. A slice of yellow light from the hallway cut through the darkness at the top of the stairs. Daddy. It was Tisha's voice, but it sounded wrong. It wasn't the drugged, sleepy voice from before. It was sharp, alert. Daddy, are you down there? I looked around. I was surrounded by open boxes, stripped wires, and batteries. There was no way to hide it all in time. I heard the heavy thud of a boot hitting the first step. That wasn't Tisha's walk. Tisha wore soft slippers. Gavin was with her. I scrambled backward, shoving the phone into my sock. I grabbed a random photo album from the box and held it to my chest like a shield. Harrison Gavin's voice boomed down the stairs, cold and commanding. Come out. We know you are down there. I looked up at the light blinding me. I was cornered in the dark. But the message was sent. The hunt was on, and they had no idea what was coming for them. The next morning the house was quiet, but the air felt heavy, like the pressure drop before a hurricane. I had survived the basement encounter by the skin of my teeth. When Gavin and Tisha found me amidst the dusty boxes, I had clutched that old photo album to my chest and played the confused old man perfectly. I wept about missing Beatrice. I told them I was looking for a picture of our wedding day. Tisha had cried and hugged me. Gavin had just stared, his eyes cold and suspicious, but he couldn't prove I was doing anything other than grieving. He had escorted me back to my room and locked the door from the outside. Now I sat in the blind spot of my room, my hand pressed against the sock where I had hidden the Nokia. I was waiting. Every second felt like an hour. Had the message gone through? Was Elias working on it? Or was I just an old fool playing spy with a dead phone? Then I felt it. A vibration against my ankle. It was short. 3 pulses. I waited 5 minutes to make sure Gavin wasn't coming in. Then I pulled the phone out. I shielded the screen with my body and opened the message. It was from Elias. It was long. And as I read the pixelated text, my blood turned to ice in my veins. Harrison, you were right. Gavin Thorne does not exist. The social security number belongs to a boy who died in 1990. His real name is Julian Slater. He has lived in Ohio and Arizona. He has been married twice before. First wife Sarah drowned in a kayaking accident 3 months after the wedding. Double indemnity insurance payout. Second wife Rebecca fell off a scenic overlook while hiking on their first anniversary. Double indemnity payout. Police suspected foul play both times, but no evidence. No witnesses. Just a grieving husband and a cremation order signed the next day. He is a predator, Harrison. Get Tisha out. Now. I lowered the phone. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. He wasn't just a gold digger. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a Bluebeard, a serial killer who hunted women for sport and profit. He courted them, married them, isolated them, and then disposed of them when the policy matured. Beatrice was just collateral damage, a way to clear the board and get some quick cash before the main event. Tisha was the main event. I looked at the date on the phone. Wednesday. His second wife died on their first anniversary. Tisha and Gavin's second anniversary was this Friday, 2 days from now. The trip to the cabin. The romantic getaway he had been planning. It wasn't a celebration, it was an execution. I had to stop him. But showing Tisha a text message on an old phone wouldn't be enough. Gavin would claim it was a spam message or that I had faked it. He was a master manipulator. I needed hard evidence. I needed something that would hold up in court, and more importantly, something that would shatter Tisha's blind trust in him. I needed to get into his office. Gavin's home office was the forbidden zone. He kept it locked at all times. He told Tisha it was because of sensitive client data. I knew it was because that was where he kept his trophies. I waited until noon. Gavin had left in his Range Rover ostensibly to meet with investors. In reality, he was probably meeting with a travel agent to book a one-way ticket for his wife's ashes. Tisha was in the garden, doped up on her medication, staring blankly at the roses. Elena was in the laundry room, deep in the basement. This was my window. I walked to the office door. It was a heavy oak door with a keypad lock. Not a keyhole I could pick with a pin. A digital keypad. I stared at the numbers. 4 digits. 10,000 combinations. I closed my eyes and thought like an insurance investigator. How does a narcissist choose a passcode? He doesn't choose random numbers. He chooses numbers that mean something to him, something that validates his ego. I tried his birthday. Error. I tried Tisha's birthday. Error. I tried the current year. Error. I paused. Think Harrison. Think like Julian Slater. What is the most important day in his life? Not the day he was born, the day he became rich, the day he got away with it. Elias's message said his first wife Sarah died on May 12th. I typed 0512. Click. The light turned green. My stomach churned. He used the date of his first murder as the key to his sanctuary. It was sick. It was arrogant. It was perfect. I slipped inside and closed the door. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke and expensive cologne. It was meticulously organized. No papers on the desk, just a large, sleek computer monitor and a leather chair. I sat in the chair. It felt like sitting on a throne of bones. I woke the computer. Password required. Of course. I looked around the room for a clue. There were no sticky notes, no family photos. But on the wall behind the desk there was a framed newspaper clipping. It wasn't about his business. It was an article about a mountain climber who survived a solo ascent of Everest. Gavin wasn't a climber, but he admired conquest. I looked back at the screen. The password hint was just one word: freedom. Freedom. What did freedom mean to Julian Slater? Money. I tried money. Incorrect. I tried millions. Incorrect. I tried widower. Incorrect. I took a deep breath. I channeled him. I imagined I was a man who hated women who saw them as shackles. When was he most free? When they were gone. I typed Sarah Rebecca, the names of his dead wives. Incorrect. I was sweating now. If I locked the system, he would know. I had one more try before the timeout. I looked at the framed article again. Solo ascent. Alone. I typed bachelor. Access granted. The screen flooded with icons. My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't have much time. I ignored the financial spreadsheets. I ignored the fake business plans. I went straight to the file explorer. I searched for hidden folders. I found a directory buried deep in the system files disguised as system32_backup. I opened it. Inside were 3 folders. Project S, Project R, Project TS for Sarah, R for Rebecca, T for Tisha. I opened Project T. I had to cover my mouth to stop a scream from escaping. It was a timeline, a meticulous, detailed timeline of my daughter's courtship, marriage, and death. Phase 1 acquisition, dated 2 years ago. Notes on Tisha's insecurities, her desire for a family, her father's financial status. Phase 2, isolation. Move to the new house, distance from friends. Phase 3, neutralization. The death of Beatrice. There were notes here about the potassium dosage, notes on how to pressure me to sell the house. Phase 4, the exit. I clicked on the document titled The Exit. It was a map of the hiking trail near the cabin they were renting for the anniversary. There was a red circle around a specific overlook, Eagle's Drop. Below the map were notes. Friday 5:00 p.m., sunset hike. No cameras on this trail. Railing is loose on the north side, loosened last week. Script. She slipped trying to take a selfie. I tried to grab her. Tragic accident. Cremation scheduled for Saturday morning at local crematorium, bribed staff. I felt sick. Physically violent sick. He had loosened the railing. He had already prepped the scene. He wasn't just going to push her. He had engineered a mechanical failure. I pulled out my Nokia. I took photos of the screen. My hands were shaking, but the images were clear enough. The timeline, the map, the confession. I needed to copy the files to a USB drive, but I didn't have one. The photos would have to be enough. Suddenly I heard the sound of tires on gravel. I froze. I looked out the window. The Range Rover was pulling into the driveway. He was back early. I looked at the computer screen. I had to close everything. I clicked out of the folders. I cleared the recent documents list. The front door opened downstairs. "Honey, I am home," Gavin called out. His voice boomed through the house. I was trapped on the second floor in the one room I wasn't supposed to be in. I looked around frantically. I couldn't go out the door. He was walking toward the stairs. I could hear his heavy footsteps. I looked at the window. It was a 20-foot drop to the rose bushes. Broken legs would be better than a broken neck. But the window was sealed shut. I looked at the closet in the office. It was shallow. If he opened it, he would find me instantly. Footsteps on the stairs. He was coming up. I saw the vent near the floor. The return air vent. It was large, old-fashioned. I grabbed the letter opener from the desk. I pried the screws loose. 1, 2. They were already loose as if someone had opened it before. I pulled the grate off. The duct was tight but big enough for a skinny old man. I squeezed inside just as the handle of the office door turned. I pulled the grate back into place, holding it with my fingers just as the door opened. I lay in the dark, dusty duct holding my breath. I saw Gavin's shoes through the slats of the grate. He walked to the desk. He stopped. He sniffed the air. He smelled something. My fear, or maybe the faint scent of my Old Spice deodorant. He sat down in the chair. I heard the keyboard clicking. He was checking the logs. I prayed I had cleared everything. He spun the chair around. He looked directly at the vent. I closed my eyes and waited for the end. But then his phone rang. He answered it. "Yes, everything is set," he said. His voice was excited. "Friday at sunset. The weather is perfect. No, I haven't told the old man yet. I will deal with him after the funeral. He will have a heart attack from the grief. 2 birds, 1 stone." He laughed. A sound that belonged in the deepest pit of hell. He walked out of the room, still talking. I lay in the duct, clutching the Nokia to my chest. I had the proof. I knew the plan. 2 days. I wasn't just fighting for Tisha anymore. I was fighting for Sarah, for Rebecca, for Beatrice. I was going to crash his anniversary party, and I was going to bring a gift he never expected: the truth. Friday morning arrived like a funeral shroud draped over the mountains. The air was thin and biting, the kind of cold that settles deep in your marrow and reminds you that nature has no mercy for the weak. Gavin was in high spirits, humming a tune as he loaded the Range Rover. He looked like the picture-perfect husband in his flannel shirt and rugged boots, planning a romantic getaway to a secluded cabin in the Blackwood Forest. He called it a dual celebration. Our 2nd anniversary, he had said, with a dazzling smile and a final family tribute to Harrison before he moves into his new home at Sunnyvale. I stood on the porch watching him, my hands buried deep in my coat pockets. Tisha stood beside me, leaning her head on my shoulder. She was still groggy from the vitamins, or rather the lack of the heavy sedatives I had been swapping out, but she was docile. She believed Gavin's story that the mountain air would clear her head. She didn't see the wolf standing right in front of her, but I did. I saw the way he checked the strap on his hiking pack. I saw the way he looked at his watch, timing our departure to ensure we reached the heights exactly as the sun began to dip. I had spent the last hour preparing for a war Gavin didn't know he was starting. In my inner jacket pocket, tucked away in a hidden lining, was a small, serrated hunting knife I had kept from my days in the service. It was old, but the steel was honest. Beside it, I had stashed something Gavin had overlooked in the basement discard pile, a high-end digital voice recorder Tisha used to use for her medical lectures. I had tested it twice. It was sensitive enough to catch a heartbeat. I didn't just want to survive this trip. I wanted Gavin Thorne or Julian Slater or whatever devil he was to confess his sins to the world before I sent him to hell. The drive was 3 hours of psychological torture. Gavin talked incessantly about the future. He spoke of the renovations he wanted to do to my house once it sold. He spoke about taking Tisha on a European cruise to help her recover from her grief. Every word was a lie, a beautiful gilded cage he was building around my daughter while I sat in the back seat, the invisible witness to her execution. Tisha just nodded, her eyes fixed on the passing pines. She looked so much like Beatrice in that moment that it broke my heart all over again. We arrived at the cabin by mid-afternoon. It was a lonely structure of cedar and stone perched on the edge of a jagged ravine. There were no neighbors for miles, no cell service, no witnesses. It was a masterpiece of planning. Gavin led us inside the floorboards, groaning under our weight. He was attentive, almost manic in his kindness. He made tea. He fluffed pillows. He told me to sit by the fire and rest my tired legs, but I didn't rest. I watched. At exactly 4:30, the light began to turn a bruised purple. Gavin stood up and stretched, looking out the panoramic window at the cliffs in the distance. "The sunset at Eagle's Drop is legendary," he said, his voice dropping into that smooth, hypnotic register. "Tisha, honey, you need to see it. It's a short walk. The air will do wonders for your soul." Tisha looked hesitant. "I'm a bit dizzy, Gavin. Maybe we should just stay here." Gavin walked over and took her hands, pulling her up gently. "No, baby. This is for us. For our anniversary. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. It's just a 10-minute hike. I'll hold you every step of the way. I stood up, gripping my cane until my knuckles turned white. I'm coming too. Gavin's eyes flickered with a brief, sharp annoyance. Harrison, it's a steep trail. Your heart... My heart is fine, Gavin, I said, staring him directly in the eye. I wouldn't miss this sunset for the world. After all, you've put so much work into planning it. It would be a shame for me to miss the grand finale. For a second, the air between us crackled. He knew I was pushing him. He knew I was defying the role of the frail old man, but he couldn't stop me without revealing his hand in front of Tisha. Fine, he said, his voice tight, but don't blame me if you can't keep up. We started up the trail. The path was narrow, choked with roots and loose shale. Gavin led the way with Tisha in the middle and me trailing behind. Every step was a struggle for me. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but I kept my eyes on Gavin's back. I saw the way he steered Tisha toward the edge of the path. I saw him pointing out the view, drawing her closer and closer to the precipice where the earth simply vanished into a 500-foot drop. We reached the Overlook Eagle's Drop. It was a jagged tongue of rock jutting out over the abyss. A rusted iron railing ran along the perimeter, looking fragile against the vastness of the canyon. I remembered the note in his office. Railing is loose on the north side. The sun was a dying ember on the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the rocks. Gavin led Tisha right to the north corner. Look at that, Tisha, he whispered, wrapping his arm around her waist. It's like the whole world is on fire. Tisha leaned forward, mesmerized by the colors. It's beautiful, Gavin. It really is. I stopped 10 feet away, my hand creeping into my jacket, my fingers curling around the digital recorder. I hit the button. The small red light glowed in the shadows of my pocket. Gavin shifted his weight. He took a half step back, his hand sliding from her waist to her shoulder. I saw his muscles tense. I saw his eyes dart to the railing. Stay close to the edge, honey, Gavin said, his voice sounding hollow in the wind. You get a better view if you lean out just a little bit. Here, hold on to the railing. It's solid. Tisha reached out her hand. Her fingers were inches from the cold, loosened metal. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I just spoke his real name. Is this where Sarah died? Julian. The world seemed to stop spinning. The wind died down. Tisha froze her hand, hovering in midair. Gavin didn't turn around immediately. His entire body went rigid as if he had been struck by lightning. What did you call him, Daddy? Tisha asked, her voice trembling. I took a step forward, discarding my cane. I didn't need it anymore. The adrenaline had burned away the age in my bones. His name isn't Gavin Tisha. His name is Julian Slater. And he didn't bring you here to watch the sunset. He brought you here because the railing is loose, just like the one Sarah slipped on. Just like the cliff Rebecca fell from. Gavin turned slowly. The mask was gone. The charming husband had vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating predator. He looked at Tisha, then at me. A slow, terrifying grin spread across his face. I told you he was losing his mind, Tisha, Gavin said, but his voice was different now. It was jagged, sharp. He's confused. He's making up stories. I pulled the Nokia phone from my other pocket and held it up. I have the files, Julian. Project S, Project R, and Project T. I saw the map. I saw the time. 5 p.m. Sunset hike, Eagle's Drop. Tisha looked at the railing, then at her husband. She took a frantic step back away from the edge. Gavin, what is he talking about? Who is? Sarah. Gavin didn't answer her. He looked at me, his eyes dark with a murderous hunger. You should have stayed in your room, old man. You should have just gone to the home and died quietly. He lunged, not for me, but for Tisha. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin, and swung her back toward the loose railing. No! I roared, diving forward. The sun vanished behind the peaks, plunging us into a gray twilight shadow. The anniversary was over. The hunt had reached its end, and only one of us was walking off this mountain. The wind at the edge of the cliff was not a breeze. It was a physical weight, a cold, invisible hand pushing against my chest as if the mountain itself wanted me gone. I watched Gavin's fingers close around Tisha's upper arm. His knuckles were white, his grip like a vice. He wasn't holding her for balance. He was positioning her. He swung her toward that north corner, the spot where he had spent an hour loosening the bolts just a week ago. Tisha let out a small, sharp cry of surprise. Gavin, you're hurting me? She gasped, her boots skidding on the loose gravel. He didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on the rusted iron railing that hung over the 500-foot drop into the darkness of the ravine. He gave her a sharp, violent shove, his palms flat against her shoulder blades. In that split second, 72 years of gravity and joint pain vanished. I didn't think about my heart condition or the arthritis in my hips. I lunged. I threw my entire body weight into a low tackle, my shoulder slamming into Gavin's hip just as Tisha's hand brushed the cold, rattling metal of the loose railing. We went down in a heap of tangled limbs and curses. Tisha fell back onto the solid rock, gasping for air, her eyes wide with terror. Gavin roared in frustration, kicking out at me, his heavy hiking boot catching me in the ribs. I felt a rib crack, a hot flash of agony that nearly made me black out, but I didn't let go of his leg. "Harrison, you old fool," Gavin hissed, scrambling to his feet. He looked down at me with a disgust so pure it was almost beautiful. "You were supposed to be the easy part. You were supposed to just fade away in a nursing home while I enjoyed your wife's legacy." He didn't look like my son-in-law anymore. The mask of the charming entrepreneur had shattered, leaving behind something jagged and sharp. This was Julian Slater. This was the man who had watched 2 other women fall to their deaths and then gone out for a steak dinner. Tisha was on her hands and knees, staring at us. "Gavin. What is happening? Daddy?" Gavin ignored her. He reached into the small of his back beneath his flannel shirt. When his hand came forward, it wasn't holding a phone or a peace offering. It was a compact 9mm semi-automatic. He clicked the safety off. The sound was small, but in the mountain silence it sounded like a thunderclap. "I'm sorry it had to come to this, Harrison," Gavin said, his voice dropping into a terrifyingly calm, conversational tone. "I really am. I had such a perfect narrative planned. The grieving widower losing his mind attacks his daughter in a fit of dementia. I, the heroic husband, try to intervene. You struggle, the gun goes off, or maybe you just lose your balance and take a tumble off the edge. Tisha would be too traumatized to remember the details. I'd be the victim. Again." He stepped toward me, the barrel of the gun pointed directly at my forehead. I could see the copper jackets of the bullets in the magazine. "You killed her," I whispered, my voice rasping through the pain in my chest. "You killed Beatrice." Gavin smiled. It was the smile of a man who had won every game he had ever played. "She was a lovely woman, Harrison. Truly. But she was worth so much more dead than alive. And she was starting to notice things. The bank statements, the late-night calls. She was too smart for her own good. Just like you." Tisha let out a strangled sob. You killed Mom?" Gavin glanced at her, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Oh, grow up, Tisha. Your mother was a means to an end, just like you are. Did you really think a man like me would settle down with a moping, insecure doctor in the suburbs? You were a paycheck, a $10 million payout that's going to fund my real life in a country where people don't ask so many questions." He turned back to me, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Goodbye, Harrison. Give my regards to Beatrice." I closed my eyes, waiting for the flash, waiting for the end. I had the recorder in my pocket. I had the truth. But I was out of time. Then I heard it. Not a gunshot. A sharp, wet thud. I opened my eyes. Tisha was standing. She wasn't swaying. She wasn't slurring. She was standing tall, her face a mask of cold, concentrated fury. She was holding a jagged piece of granite the size of a grapefruit. She had smashed it into the side of Gavin's head with every ounce of strength she possessed. Gavin stumbled, his eyes glazing over for a second. The gun wavered. "You bastard," Tisha hissed. Her voice was steady, sharp, and filled with a power I hadn't heard in years. Gavin shook his head, blood trickling from his temple. "Tisha, you're supposed to be out of it. The medication you've been forcing down my throat." Tisha took a step toward him, her hands clenched into fists. "My father swapped them weeks ago, Gavin. I haven't been taking your sedatives. I've been taking vitamins. My head hasn't been this clear since the day you moved into our lives." Gavin stared at her, the realization dawning on his face. He looked at me, then back at Tisha. The predator realized the prey had been awake the entire time. "I've been watching you, Gavin." Tisha continued, her voice trembling with rage. "I watched you check your watch today. I watched you steer me toward the railing. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted my father to be wrong. I wanted my life to be real. But I saw your face just now. I saw the way you looked at me when you thought I was about to die." Gavin's face contorted. He raised the gun again, but his hand was shaking now. The blood was blurring his vision. "So what? You're still a weak, pathetic girl." You think you can stop me? I'll kill you both right now and tell the police a mountain lion got you. He started to squeeze the trigger. I didn't wait. I lunged again, grabbing his wrist, twisting with all the strength I had left in my old bones. We rolled again, dangerously close to the edge. The loose railing groaned as our weight pressed against it. Tisha didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She grabbed Gavin's hair and yanked his head back, her fingers clawing at his eyes. "Get off of him," she screamed. The gun fired. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, a sharp metallic crack that sent a flock of birds screaming into the twilight. I felt the heat of the bullet pass an inch from my ear. We were teetering on the very edge. The bolts in the north railing finally gave way. With a sickening screech of tearing metal, the iron bar swung outward into the void. Gavin's eyes went wide. He lost his footing on the loose shale. He started to slide. He grabbed my coat, trying to pull me down with him. I felt myself slipping my boots, finding no purchase on the wet rock. Daddy Tisha grabbed my other arm, her feet planted firmly on the solid ground. She pulled with everything she had, her face turning purple with the effort. Gavin was dangling over the abyss, held only by his grip on my lapels. The gun had fallen into the darkness long ago. He looked up at me, his face stripped of all arrogance. For the first time, I saw Julian Slater for what he was, a coward, a small, pathetic thief who was terrified of the dark. "Help me, Harrison, please. I'll give it back. I'll tell you everything." I looked down at the man who had murdered my wife. I looked at the man who had tried to steal my daughter's soul. I reached down and slowly, deliberately unprised his fingers from my coat, one by one. "This isn't an accident, Julian," I said, my voice as cold as the mountain air. "This is a claim adjustment." I let go. He didn't scream like in the movies. He just fell, a dark shape disappearing into the black maw of the ravine. A few seconds later, there was a distant thud, then silence. The wind picked up, whistling through the gap where the railing used to be. I slumped against the rock, my lungs burning my ribcage, screaming in pain. Tisha collapsed beside me, pulling me into a desperate, sobbing hug. "It's over, Daddy," she wept into my chest. "It's over." I stroked her hair, looking out at the last sliver of sun disappearing behind the world. We were alive. We were broken, bruised, and mourning, but we were finally free of the monster. But as I sat there, I felt the weight of the digital recorder in my pocket. I knew the police would have questions. I knew the world would want to know how a 72-year-old man and his daughter survived a killer in the woods. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of the pine and the cold stone. The investigation was closed, but the healing was just beginning. I did not wait to hear the finality of his scream. In the insurance business, you learn very quickly that death is only a certainty when you are standing over the cold body on a metal slab. Gavin was young, he was fit, and he was fueled by a desperation that can make a man do the impossible. As Tisha and I scrambled back from the jagged edge of Eagle's Drop, I heard a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was a scrape, the sound of a heavy boot catching a ledge, then a grunt of pure animalistic rage. He had not fallen all the way. He had caught a branch or a secondary outcropping. I looked at Tisha. She was paralyzed. The adrenaline that had allowed her to strike him with the rock was fading, leaving her in the cold grip of shock. Her eyes were fixed on the void where her husband had just disappeared. "Tisha, move," I hissed. I grabbed her arm, yanking her toward the tree line, but she stammered, her voice thin and reedy like a broken flute. "He is coming back, Tisha, and he still has that gun." I led her into the dense wall of pine and spruce. The forest was different at night. The trees were no longer beautiful. They were jagged black teeth biting into the moonlight. The ground was a minefield of roots and loose shale. Every step was a gamble for my 72-year-old knees. My broken rib was a hot coal in my side, glowing with every breath I took. We had moved maybe 50 yards into the brush when I heard it, the sound of someone hauling themselves over the rock ledge behind us. Then a cough, a wet, hacking cough. Harrison Gavin roared. His voice did not sound human. It was a guttural howl that echoed off the canyon walls. "I will find you. I will kill you both, and I will burn that house to the ground with your bodies inside." He was close, too close. He knew this trail. He had spent the last week mapping it out for his perfect murder. I was an old man with a cane I had left back at the Overlook and a daughter who was barely holding on to her sanity. We could not outrun him, not in a straight line. I stopped. I pulled Tisha behind a massive ancient oak tree. "Wait," I whispered. I looked around. To our left, the ground sloped sharply down into a dry creek bed filled with dead leaves and fallen branches. If we ran down there, we would make enough noise to wake the dead. To our right, the woods were thick with mountain laurel. I reached down and felt the ground until my fingers closed around a heavy, jagged stone. I looked at the creek bed. "Stay here," I breathed into Tisha's ear. "Do not make a sound." I stepped out from behind the tree just far enough to get a clear angle. I threw the stone with everything I had left in my shoulder. I didn't aim for Gavin. I aimed for a pile of dried brush 30 yards down the creek bed. Crack! The stone hit a dead log and tumbled into the leaves. In the silence of the woods, it sounded like a frantic animal or a person stumbling. I heard Gavin's footsteps stop. "There you are," he hissed. I heard the sound of him crashing through the brush toward the noise. He was blinded by his own rage. He wanted us so badly he was willing to believe the first sound he heard. Now I whispered, grabbing Tisha's hand. We didn't run. Running makes noise. We moved with a frantic, calculated stealth. I led her deeper into the thicket toward the higher ground. I kept us on the rocky patches where our boots wouldn't leave deep prints in the pine needles. My father had taught me how to walk in the woods of Georgia when I was a boy, and those lessons came back to me now like they were engraved in my soul. Step on the stone, avoid the dry twig, lean into the shadows. We climbed for 10 minutes. My heart was a drum in my ears. I could feel the blood pulsing in my neck. I looked at Tisha. She was moving like a ghost. The drugs were gone, and the doctor was back. Her movements were precise. We reached a small clearing where the moonlight hit the forest floor. Tisha stopped. She turned to me, her face a mask of agony. "Daddy," she whispered, the tears finally breaking through. "I am so sorry. I didn't believe you. I let him in. I let him hurt Mom. I was so stupid." I reached out and cupped her face with my rough, calloused hands. She was trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. "Listen to me, Tisha," I said, my voice low and hard. "You were not stupid. You were loved. He used that love like a weapon. That is not on you. That is on the monster. You didn't kill your mother. He did. And you didn't let him in. He forced his way in with lies. But I chose him," she sobbed. "We do not have time for this, Tisha. Save the guilt. Save the apologies. We live today. We survive this night. Then we talk about the rest. You are a duke, and dukes do not lie down for anybody. You understand me." She looked at me, and for the first time I saw the fire return to her eyes. She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Good," I said. "Now keep moving." We crested the ridge. The wind was howling now, whipping through the pines. Below us I could see the faint glow of a light. It wasn't the cabin, it was further north. Gavin's voice drifted up from the valley below. He had realized the stone was a trick. "Tisha," he called out. His voice was suddenly sweet and melodic. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. "Honey, I know you are scared. Your father is confused. He is a sick man, Tisha. He is making you do things you do not want to do. Come back to me. We can go home. We can forget all of this. I love you, Tisha." He was still trying to gaslight her in the middle of a dark forest while he hunted us with a gun. It was the ultimate arrogance. He believed he still owned her mind. Tisha gripped my arm. Her fingernails dug into my skin. I did not flinch. "Ignore him," I said. "He is a ghost. He is already dead. He just doesn't know it yet." We started down the other side of the ridge. The terrain was steeper here. I slipped twice, my bad leg giving way. Tisha caught me both times, her strength surprising me. She was her mother's daughter after all. Beatrice had been the strongest woman I ever knew, and that strength had passed into Tisha's blood. We reached a small plateau. In the center stood a structure. It was a small square building made of weathered cedar planks. It was perched on 4 thick wooden stilts, a retired firewatch station. The windows were boarded up and the stairs looked rotten, but it was a fortress compared to the open woods. There I pointed. We ran for the stairs. Every step groaned under our weight. I expected a bullet to hit me in the back at any second. I pushed Tisha through the door first. The inside smelled of dust and old paper. There was a rusted metal desk and a single chair. A map of the forest was still pinned to the wall, yellowed and peeling. I slammed the door and slid the heavy iron bolt into place. It was a solid door. It would hold for a while. I slumped against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. I couldn't stop the groan of pain that escaped my lips. My rib felt like it had pierced my lung. Daddy Tisha knelt beside me. "You're bleeding." I looked down. My shirt was soaked. The struggle on the cliff had reopened an old wound, or maybe the rib had done more damage than I thought. "I am fine," I lied. "Check the windows. See if there is anything we can use." Tisha moved to the boarded-up window. She peered through a gap in the wood. "I see a light," she whispered. "A flashlight. He is coming up the ridge. He is coming fast, Daddy." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the digital recorder. I checked the battery. 10%. I looked at Tisha. "I need you to listen to me. If he gets in here, I want you to go out the back window. There is a small ledge. You drop down and you run toward the road. Do not stop for me. I am not leaving you," she said, her voice hard as flint. "You will do what I tell you," I snapped. Then I saw something in the corner of the room, an old flare gun. It was sitting on a shelf covered in cobwebs. Beside it was a single orange cartridge. I reached for it. My hand was steady. Gavin's footsteps hit the stairs. The whole station shuddered. "Harrison," he called out from right outside the door. "I know you are in there. You are trapped. There is nowhere left to run. Give me the phone and the recorder and I will let Tisha live. I promise." I looked at Tisha. I held the flare gun in my hand. "You hear that?" I whispered. He is still promising. I stood up, leaning against the desk for support. I looked at the door. "Julian," I shouted, my voice echoing in the small room. "You are a terrible businessman." "What the hell are you talking about?" Gavin yelled, kicking the door. "You didn't do your research," I said. "I was an insurance investigator for 40 years, and there is one thing I know better than anyone." "What is?" that Gavin roared, slamming his shoulder against the wood. "I know exactly what a total loss looks like," I said. "And you, Julian, are at the end of your policy." The door began to splinter. I raised the flare gun. I looked at my daughter. "Get ready," I said. The hunt was over. The battle for the station was about to begin, and I was going to make sure that Julian Slater's final claim was denied. The rain began as a whisper against the cedar shingles before turning into a rhythmic drumming that drowned out the sounds of the forest. It was a cold mountain rain, the kind that turns the earth into a slick, treacherous soup. Inside the watch station, the air was thick with the scent of dust and ozone. I could hear Gavin circling below the stilts, his boots crunching on the wet gravel. Then came a sharp, metallic snip. He had found the old external phone line and cut it. He thought he was cutting my throat, but he didn't realize that line had been dead since the late 90s. He was playing a game of psychological warfare, but I was the one who had spent 40 years looking at the crime scenes he was trying to create. Tisha was huddled in the corner, her eyes fixed on the door. She was holding an old, rusty fire axe she had found behind the desk. Her knuckles were white. She looked like a soldier waiting for the trench to be overrun. I didn't want her to fight. I wanted her to survive. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "He is coming up the stairs." I didn't answer. I was on my knees by the rusted fuse box near the door. This station was old, but it still had a heavy-duty lead-acid battery array in the floorboards connected to a small wind turbine on the roof. It was meant to power the radio gear in emergencies. I pulled back the rotted wood, exposing the thick copper cables. My hands were slick with sweat and rain, but I remembered the wiring diagrams from my days as a junior mechanic in Detroit. Red to positive, black to ground. But if I bridged the main breaker directly to the iron door handle, I could create a circuit that would deliver a non-lethal but paralyzing jolt to anyone touching the metal from the outside. I stripped the insulation with my teeth, the bitter taste of rubber filling my mouth. I ignored the ache in my chest and the stabbing pain from my broken rib. I had maybe 60 seconds. I looped the exposed copper wire around the internal latch mechanism of the door. I could hear Gavin's heavy breathing on the other side of the wood. He was standing on the landing, savoring the moment. "Give it up, Harrison," Gavin shouted, his voice muffled by the storm. "You are an old man in a wooden box. Just open the door and we can end this like gentlemen. I will even let you say goodbye to Tisha." I didn't say a word. I reached for the master switch. I looked at Tisha and signaled her to move away from the door. I threw the switch. A low hum filled the room as the old batteries groaned under the sudden draw. The lights on the control panel flickered once, then died. The door handle was now live. A split second later, the door handle rattled. Gavin was trying the latch. Ag! A horrific primal scream ripped through the air. I heard the sound of muscles seizing and the smell of scorched fabric. Gavin was thrown backward, hitting the wooden railing of the landing with a heavy thud. The whole station shuddered. I grabbed the fire axe from Tisha's hands. I thought that would be enough. I thought a 200-volt jolt would put an end to the Bluebeard of the Blackwood Forest. I was wrong. The door didn't just open. It exploded. Gavin didn't use the handle this time. He used his shoulder, charging the wood like a bull. The splintered cedar gave way, and Gavin Thorne burst into the room. He looked like a demon rising from the pit. His hair was matted with blood and rain. His expensive flannel shirt was scorched at the sleeve where the current had caught him. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with a madness that no insurance policy could ever cover. He didn't go for his gun. He wanted to feel my life leave my body with his own hands. He lunged across the small room. I swung the axe with everything I had left, but I was too slow. Gavin caught the handle mid-air and wrenched it out of my grip, tossing it aside like a toy. He slammed his fist into my jaw. I saw stars. I felt my teeth cut into my lip as I was thrown backward against the metal desk. I tried to stand, but he was on me. He grabbed my throat with his massive hands, pinning me against the wall. I could see the charred skin on his palms from the trap. He was smiling through the pain. "You think you are so smart," he spat. "You think a little electricity can stop me. I have survived worse than you, Harrison. I have buried better men than you." He squeezed. I felt the air being cut off. My lungs screamed for oxygen. I clawed at his face, digging my fingernails into the wound Tisha had opened earlier. He didn't even flinch. He was beyond pain. He was pure predatory intent. Daddy Tisha screamed. She lunged at his back, hammering her fists against his shoulders. She was trying to pull him off me, but she was a fly attacking a mountain. Gavin swung his elbow back, catching Tisha in the temple. She collapsed to the floor, her head hitting the edge of the desk. She went limp. "Tisha." I tried to yell, but only a gurgle came out. I reached into my pocket. My fingers touched the cold steel of the hunting knife. I pulled it out and stabbed blindly at Gavin's side. The blade sank into his hip. He let out a sharp hiss and finally let go of my throat. I fell to the floor, gasping for air, my vision blurred by tears and sweat. Gavin looked down at the knife sticking out of his leg. He pulled it out slowly, his face contorting into a mask of cold fury. He dropped the knife and reached into his waistband. He pulled the 9mm. He didn't point it at me. He stepped over my shaking body and walked toward the corner where Tisha lay unconscious. He reached down and grabbed her by her hair, yanking her head back. He pressed the cold barrel of the gun against her temple. "Get up, Harrison," Gavin said, his voice eerily calm now. "Get up and watch your daughter die." I tried to push myself off the floor, but my legs were like jelly. I was 72 years old. My rib was broken. My throat was crushed. I had used every trick, every trap, and every ounce of strength I possessed. And it wasn't enough. The predator was still standing. "Look at me!" Gavin roared. I looked up. I saw my daughter's pale face in the moonlight. I saw the man who had murdered my wife holding the trigger that would end my bloodline forever. "This is the total loss you were talking about," Harrison, Gavin whispered. "Everything you love, everything you built, gone in a single click." He started to squeeze the trigger. But in the darkness of the station, beneath the sound of the rain, I heard a faint beep. It was the digital recorder in my pocket. The battery was dying. It let out one final long tone. Gavin paused, his eyes darting toward the sound. That was all I needed. I didn't have strength. I didn't have a weapon. But I had one thing Gavin Thorne would never understand. I had the truth. "The investigation isn't over, Julian." I rasped, my voice a bloody whisper. "Look at the window." Gavin frowned, his eyes shifting toward the boarded-up glass. He didn't see anything. Then a flash of blue and red light cut through the cracks in the wood. Not from the road, from the sky. The heavy thrum of a helicopter engine suddenly shook the entire building. The downdraft from the rotors ripped the loose cedar shingles off the roof. A massive searchlight slammed into the station, turning the interior into a blinding white void. Gavin shielded his eyes, his arm shaking. "What is this?" "It is the adjusters," I said with a bloody smile. "And they are here to deny your claim." The darkness of the watch station was absolute for one heartbeat, and then it was shattered by a light so bright it felt like the eye of God had opened in the middle of the Blackwood Forest. Gavin's finger was on the trigger. He was a split second away from ending my bloodline and burying the truth forever in this rain-soaked ravine. I could see the muscles in his jaw tensing. I could see the cold, predatory focus in his eyes. He didn't care about the noise outside. He didn't care about the storm. He only cared about the $10 million payout that was currently pressed against my daughter's temple. But then came the sound. It wasn't the shrill wail of a police siren or the distant shout of a park ranger. It was a deep, rhythmic thrumming that shook the very foundation of the wooden station. It was the sound of heavy machinery slicing through the mountain mist. The floorboards vibrated under my chest, and the dust from the ceiling fell like snow over Gavin's face. He paused, his eyes darting toward the boarded-up window. "What is that?" he roared over the increasing thunder of the rotors. I managed to push myself up against the metal desk, my breath coming in jagged, painful rasps. I looked at the man who had murdered my wife, and I smiled through the blood in my mouth. "I told you, Julian," I whispered. "I told you that you were at the end of your policy." A massive beam of white light suddenly pierced through the cracks in the cedar walls. It was so intense it turned the shadows into sharp black knives. The station was no longer a dark hiding place. It was a stage, and the spotlight was fixed on the lead actor. Gavin squinted, his arm shaking as he tried to maintain his grip on Tisha's hair. He was blinded, he was confused. The predator was suddenly the prey, and he didn't know who was hunting him. "It's the police," he screamed, pulling Tisha closer, using her as a human shield. "Tell them to stay back, Harrison. Tell them I will kill her." I shook my head slowly. "They aren't the police, Julian. The police have rules. The police have paperwork. The police have to wait for a warrant while you finish your business." "Then who is it?" Gavin yelled, his voice cracking with panic. I leaned back against the wall, feeling the weight of the digital recorder in my pocket. "You remember that message I sent from the basement, Julian? You thought I was calling my old friend Elias. And I did. But I sent a copy of your Project T file to someone else. I sent it to the Special Investigation Unit at Global Life and Casualty. My old employers." Gavin's face went pale. "Why would an insurance company be here?" "Because, Julian, you made a very big mistake in your calculations," I said. "To you, Tisha is a jackpot. To you, she is a $10 million check. But to Global Life and Casualty, Tisha is a liability. You see, they don't want to pay you. They never want to pay. They spend millions of dollars every year on people like me just to find a reason to deny a claim. And when I sent them your meticulous timeline, when I showed them your map of Eagle's Drop and the forged signature on Beatrice's policy, they didn't see a crime. They saw a chance to save $10 million. I coughed, a spray of red hitting the floor. The roar of the helicopter was right above us now. The wind from the rotors was tearing the loose shingles off the roof, and the sound was a deafening mechanical scream. "Those men in that helicopter aren't officers of the law, Julian," I continued, my voice rising to a shout. "They are private recovery agents. They are the adjusters, and they are here to ensure that the insured party, my daughter, stays alive, because if she dies, they lose $10 million. And believe me, Julian, they will protect that money with a violence that would make a hitman blush. They don't need a trial. They don't need a confession. They just need you to be a threat so they can neutralize the claim." Gavin looked at the window, then back at me. His world was shattering. Everything he had built, his lies, his murders, his fake charm, it was all being dismantled by the very thing he worshipped: greed. He was being hunted by a corporation that was more cold and calculated than he ever was. The front door of the station, which was hanging by a single hinge, was suddenly blown inward by a flashbang. The room filled with white smoke and a deafening bang. Gavin screamed, shielding his eyes, dropping the gun for a fraction of a second as he tried to regain his balance in the blinding light. "Tisha," now I roared. My daughter, who had been playing the part of the victim who had been waiting for her moment, didn't hesitate. She didn't run for the door. She lunged for the heavy red fire extinguisher mounted on the wall next to her. She ripped it from the bracket with a strength born of pure survival instinct. Gavin reached for his pistol, his hand fumbling on the floor in the smoke. He was blind and he was desperate. He found the grip and started to raise it, but Tisha was faster. She swung the heavy metal canister in a wide arc. It wasn't a desperate flail. It was a precise, focused strike. She caught Gavin right on the temple, the same spot where he had struck her mother. The sound was a dull, sickening thud. Gavin's head snapped back. His eyes rolled into the back of his head and the gun clattered across the floorboards. He fell like a sack of stones, his body hitting the floor with a heavy finality. He didn't groan. He didn't move. He lay there in the bright white light of the searchlight, a small broken man who had tried to play God and lost to a better accountant. Tisha stood over him, the fire extinguisher still clutched in her hands, her chest heaving. She looked at me, her eyes wide and bright with a fierce, terrifying clarity. "Is he dead?" she asked, her voice cold. "I don't know," I said, struggling to my feet. "And I don't care." I walked over to her and took the extinguisher from her hands. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight as the smoke began to clear. Outside, the helicopter began to descend the searchlight, never wavering from the fallen man on the floor. Two men in black tactical gear dropped from the skids before the helicopter even touched the ground. They burst into the room with suppressed rifles, their movements silent and professional. They didn't look at us. They went straight to Gavin. One of them checked his pulse while the other secured his hands with heavy zip ties. The first man looked at me. He had a headset on and a face that was as expressive as a tombstone. "Mr. Duke," he said, "the company sends its regards. You were always our best investigator." "Is the claim secure?" I asked, my voice raspy. "Target is alive, and the evidence is recorded," he replied. "The liability is neutralized. We will take it from here. The local authorities are 10 minutes out. We will be gone before they arrive." "We were never here, Mr. Duke." I nodded. I knew how it worked. The insurance company would hand over the evidence to the police anonymously. They would get their conviction, and they would never have to pay out a cent. It wasn't justice in the way the movies showed it. It was business. But for me, it was everything. I led Tisha out of the station and into the cold mountain rain. We walked toward the edge of the ridge, away from the noise and the lights. We sat on a fallen log and watched as the black helicopter rose back into the clouds, disappearing as quickly as it had arrived. The storm was moving on. In the distance, I could see the first faint glow of a new dawn. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photo of Beatrice. It was crumpled and wet, but her smile was still there. "We did it, Bea," I whispered. Tisha leaned her head on my shoulder. She was shaking now, the shock finally setting in. But she was alive, and she was free. The sound of real sirens began to echo through the valley. The police were coming to clean up the mess. They would find Julian Slater. They would find the files. They would find the truth. But as I sat there in the rain, I realized that the most important truth wasn't in a folder or on a recorder. It was in the hand that Tisha was holding. It was the fact that a 72-year-old man and his daughter were still standing. The investigation was officially closed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to write a report. I just needed to go home. The hospital smelled of bleach and dying hope. It is a scent I have known too well throughout my career, but this time it was different. This time, the antiseptic sting was not just in the air, but in my soul. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, my chest wrapped in tight white bandages. Every breath was a reminder of the struggle on that cliff. Every heartbeat was a dull thud against my cracked ribs. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the silence in the room. Tisha sat in the plastic chair across from me. She had a small bandage on her temple where Gavin had struck her, but her eyes were the real injury. They were hollow. They were the eyes of someone who had looked into the sun and realized it was made of ice. She had stopped crying an hour ago. Now she just stared at her hands as if she did not recognize them as her own. The heavy door creaked open. Detective Miller walked in. He was a man who had seen 1,000 crime scenes, but he was carrying a manila folder with a grip that told me the contents were heavier than paper. He looked at me, then he looked at Tisha. He pulled up a chair and sat down slowly. We processed the Range Rover. Mr. Duke Miller began, his voice low and gravelly. The agents who called it in were gone by the time we arrived, but they left the vehicle exactly where you said it would be. They left us a nice little trail to follow. I nodded. I knew the insurance company would be thorough. They had to be. They needed the conviction to protect their $10 million. "What did you find?" Tisha asked. Her voice was a ghost of its former self. It was thin and brittle like dry leaves. Miller took a deep breath. He opened the folder. He pulled out a series of photographs of items laid out on a forensic table. "First, we found the hidden compartment in the trunk, just like your father described. Inside, there was a leather satchel. It contained the original life insurance policies for Sarah Thompson and Rebecca Vance, Julian's first two wives. Along with those were the payout receipts, millions of dollars deposited into offshore accounts that Julian thought we couldn't track." He laid another photo down. It showed several small glass vials labeled with medical codes. "This is the potassium chloride," Miller said. "It matches the toxicology report from your mother's blood work." There were 3 vials left. One was half empty. We also found several high-potency benzodiazepines and antipsychotics, the stuff he was dosing you with, Tisha. Tisha closed her eyes. She leaned back against the wall, her breath hitching in her throat. She had lived with a man who was systematically erasing her, and she had called him husband. But there was more, Miller said. His voice became even softer, almost a whisper. We found a small velvet-lined box at the very bottom of the satchel. Julian didn't just want the money. He was a collector. He pulled out the final photograph. It wasn't a document. It wasn't a vial. It was a small, ornate silver jar. Tisha's eyes snapped open. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Is that—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "It is your mother's ashes," Miller said. "Part of them. Julian never scattered them like he told you. He kept them in his car, along with a lock of hair from Sarah and a wedding ring from Rebecca. He kept them as trophies. He wanted to keep his victories close to him." The silence that followed was deafening. It was a silence that felt like a physical weight pressing down on the room. Tisha didn't scream. She didn't howl. She just slumped forward, her forehead resting on her knees, and began to make a sound that was less of a cry and more of a wounded animal's moan. It was the sound of a heart finally shattering into a million pieces. I stood up, ignoring the fire in my ribs. I walked over to her and wrapped my arms around her shaking shoulders. I pulled her into my chest, holding her as tight as I could. I felt her tears soaking through my hospital gown, but I didn't let go. "I am sorry, Tisha," I whispered into her hair. "I am so sorry I couldn't protect her." "It wasn't your fault, Daddy," she sobbed, her words muffled against my chest. "It was me. I loved him. I slept next to him. I let him take her away, and I thanked him for it. How could I be so blind? How could I let a monster touch me?" I gripped her tighter. "You didn't let him in, Tisha. He stole his way in. He spent years perfecting the mask. He didn't just fool you. He fooled everyone. But he didn't fool your mother. Not at the end. She knew. That is why she is still helping us now." Tisha pulled back her face, a mask of agony. "What do you mean?" "Beatrice left us a trail, Tisha. She knew something was wrong. That is why she stayed so long, why she didn't leave even when she was tired. She was protecting you, and she left her truth in the hands of people she knew would listen. She knew I would never stop looking." Miller stood up and placed his hand on my shoulder. "We have enough, Harrison. Between the recorder, the files in his office, and the trophies in the car, Julian Slater is never going to see the sun again. The prosecutor is already talking about a triple homicide charge. He is going to spend the rest of his life in a maximum security cage." I looked at Miller. "And the money. The insurance company has frozen all the accounts," Miller said. "The $10 million will never reach him. They are already working with the families of the other victims to set up a restitution fund. Tisha will get her mother's estate back. It won't bring Beatrice back, but it will ensure Julian never profits a cent from her death." Miller left the room, leaving us in the quiet, sterile light. Tisha leaned against me, her strength gone. She looked at the photo of the silver jar. "I want her back, Daddy," she whispered. "I want to bring her home." "We will, Tisha," I said. "We will bring her back to the garden. We will bury her under the oak tree where the sun hits the grass in the morning. We will give her the peace he tried to steal." I looked out the window at the city skyline. Somewhere in a basement cell, Julian Slater was realizing that he had lost. He had underestimated an old man's love and a daughter's resilience. He had thought he was the smartest person in the room, but he forgot that the truth has a way of rising to the surface, no matter how deep you bury it. I felt a strange sense of calm. The hunt was over. The predator was caged. My wife was avenged. But as I looked at my daughter, I knew the real work was just beginning. We were two broken people in a broken world, but we were together. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I could finally take a deep breath. "I am right here, Tisha," I said. "And I am never letting go." 6 months, 180 days. That is how long it took for the wheels of justice to grind their way to this cold marble courtroom. I sat in the front row, my back straight and my suit freshly pressed. Tisha sat next to me, her hand firmly in mine. She was no longer the fragile girl I had carried out of the Blackwood forest. She had her mother's eyes now, hard, clear, unbreakable. Across the aisle sat the man I had spent my life savings to destroy, Gavin Thorne, or Julian Slater. Whatever name he chose, he looked the same, smug. He was wearing a $3,000 suit provided by a legal team that cost more than my first house. He sat there whispering to his lead attorney, a shark named Henderson, who specialized in making monsters look like choir boys. The courtroom was packed. The story of the Bluebeard killer had captured the city. But to Gavin, it was just another stage. He looked at me and winked. A quick, subtle movement. He thought he was untouchable. He thought that without a body his lawyers could spin a web of doubt that would set him free. Mr. Henderson stood up and paced in front of the jury. "Members of the jury," he said, his voice like warm honey, "this is a tragic story. But it is not a story of murder. It is a story of a family torn apart by grief and the deteriorating mind of an elderly man. My client, Gavin Thorne, is a successful businessman who has lost his wife, and instead of support, he has been met with a calculated campaign of harassment by his father-in-law, Harrison Duke." He turned and pointed a finger at me. "A man who, by his own daughter's admission, was showing signs of severe memory loss. A man who hallucinated poison. A man who lured his son-in-law into a dark forest and tried to execute him. Gavin Thorne is the victim here." Gavin bowed his head, looking like he was about to cry. It was a masterclass in deception. Tisha squeezed my hand so hard I thought her knuckles would snap. I remained silent. I knew the defense's strategy was to paint me as a senile lunatic. They had spent weeks trying to suppress the evidence found in the car, claiming it was planted. For 3 hours, they dragged my name through the mud. They brought up my medical records. They brought up the shattered vase from the living room. They made me look like a dangerous predator and Gavin like the suffering saint. By the end of their opening statement, some of the jurors were looking at me with pity. Then it was our turn. The prosecution called its first witness, Elena. I saw Gavin's posture change instantly. He sat up straighter. His eyes narrowed into slits. He hadn't expected her. He thought he had scared her enough that she would be on a bus back to her home country by now. But he didn't know that I had spent the last 6 months working with the district attorney to secure her immunity and a protected visa. I had told her that the only way to be safe from Gavin Thorne was to make sure he never left a prison cell. Elena walked to the stand. She was shaking her hands, clutching a small rosary. She didn't look at Gavin. She looked at me, and I gave her a small nod. "Tell the court about the smoothies," Elena, the prosecutor said. Elena's voice was small, but it carried to every corner of the room. "He made me put the powder in," she said. "He said it was for her health. But then he told me if I didn't do it, he would have the police take my son away. He made me crush the pills every day. He said he wanted his wife to be quiet. He said a baby would ruin his plans." Gavin's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, hearsay, and coercion. This woman is a disgruntled employee looking for a payout." The judge overruled him. Elena continued. She told them about the night Gavin looked for the papers in the garage. She told them about the fear that permeated the house. But Henderson was a professional. During cross-examination, he tore her apart. He asked about her illegal status. He asked if the prosecution had promised her money. By the time she left the stand, the jury looked uncertain again. Gavin smiled at me. He leaned back and mouthed the words, "I win," at me. That was his mistake. He thought I was out of moves. He thought I was just an old man with a grudge. The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, we would like to present one final piece of evidence. A digital recording recovered from a mobile device found at the scene of the watch station." Gavin's lawyer laughed. "A mobile device? You mean the old Nokia? We have already established that the device was malfunctioning and the files were corrupted." The prosecutor smiled. He didn't look at the lawyer. He looked at the jury. "We managed to recover one file. A voice memo recorded on Friday at 5:02 p.m. He hit a button on his laptop. The courtroom fell into a silence so deep you could hear the heartbeat of the person next to you. A crackle of wind and rain filled the room. Then a voice. Gavin's voice. Sharp, cold, stripped of all the charm. "You should have stayed in your room, old man. You should have just gone to the home and died quietly." The jury gasped. Tisha's eyes filled with tears as she heard her husband's true voice for the first time in a public setting. The recording continued. My voice came through rasping and weak. "You killed her. You killed Beatrice." Then the sound of Gavin laughing, a dry, hollow sound that chilled everyone to the bone. "She was a lovely woman, Harrison, truly, but she was worth so much more dead than alive, and she was starting to notice things, the bank statements, the late-night calls. She was too smart for her own good, just like you." The audio played the sound of the struggle on the cliff, the sound of Tisha hitting him, and then the final confrontation where he threatened to tell the police a mountain lion killed us. It was a confession from the mouth of the devil himself. Gavin wasn't smiling anymore. His face was the color of ash. His lawyers were staring at their feet. There was no way to spin this, no way to call it a hallucination. The jury didn't even need an hour. They returned with a verdict of guilty on all counts: murder in the first degree, attempted murder, insurance fraud, grand larceny. The judge looked down at Gavin over his spectacles. "Julian Slater," he said, using his real name. "You are a predator who has spent your life preying on the love and trust of others. You have left a trail of broken families and dead women in your wake. You thought you could outsmart the law, and you thought you could outsmart a father's love. I am sentencing you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will be taken from this place to a state facility where you will remain until the day you die." The gavel hit the wood. Crack. Justice was served. I stood up as the guards led him away in shackles. Gavin looked at me as he passed. He didn't look like a monster anymore. He just looked like a small, pathetic man who had finally run out of time. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I walked out of the courtroom with Tisha. The sun was shining on the courthouse steps. It was a warm, beautiful day. "Is it over, Daddy?" she asked. I looked up at the sky. I felt a cool breeze on my face. It felt like Beatrice's hand. "Yes, Tisha," I said. "It is finally over. In a world where charm is often a mask and greed a silent poison, we must remember that the greatest defense is not a wall but the truth. Justice may be slow and the cost of revealing it may be high, but the light will always find a way through the cracks of a lie. Never underestimate the quiet strength of those who have seen the darkness, for they are the ones who know how to bring the dawn. Hold your loved ones close. Watch the shadows, and never be afraid to speak the name of the monster, for that is how you strip them of their power." The gavel strike was the loudest sound I ever heard, but the silence that followed in the weeks after was even heavier. Justice is a cold meal, and once you have finished it, you realize you are still sitting at an empty table. For a while, Tisha and I lived in a sort of gray world. We moved out of the guest wing of Gavin's mansion within 48 hours of the arrest. Walking through those glass halls felt like walking through the belly of a shark. Every reflection in those floor-to-ceiling windows reminded me of the man who had tried to erase my family for a $10 million check. Tisha didn't hesitate. She put the house on the market the very next day. She didn't care about the price. She didn't care about the market trends Gavin was always obsessing over. She just wanted the keys out of her hand. When the sale finally went through, she did something that made me prouder than any medical degree ever could. She sat down at the kitchen table of my old house, the house she had once been ashamed of, and she wrote 3 letters. One went to Sarah's sister in Ohio. One went to Rebecca's parents in Arizona, and the third went to Elena. The money from the insurance payout and the proceeds from the mansion sale did not stay in our bank accounts. Tisha called it blood money. She spent weeks working with lawyers to set up a restitution fund. She sent checks to the families of the women Julian had murdered before he ever met her. She paid for Sarah's nephew to go to college. She paid for Rebecca's mother's medical care, and she bought Elena a small house in a safe neighborhood and set up a trust for her son's education. We didn't keep a dime of the profit from Julian's crimes. We kept my retirement and the house Beatrice and I had built together. That was enough. You cannot build a new life on the bones of the old ones. Tisha told me she finally felt like she could breathe again. The weight of being a victim was gone. She was no longer the moping, insecure doctor Gavin had tried to create. She had found her spine in the middle of a dark forest, and she wasn't about to let it go soft again. But we couldn't just go back to the way things were. I was 72 years old and Tisha was 35, but we were both different people now. We had seen behind the curtain. We knew that the world was full of men like Julian Slater, men who used charm as a camouflage and love as a trap. We started getting calls. At first it was just friends of friends. Women who felt like something was wrong in their marriages but couldn't put their finger on it. Women who were being gaslit, isolated, or drained of their finances. One afternoon, while we were sitting on the porch, Tisha looked at me and said, "Daddy, we have a set of skills that people need. You have the investigative mind, and I have the medical knowledge to see the signs of drugging and psychological abuse. Why are we sitting here waiting for the grass to grow?" And so Duke and Duke Family Security was born. We didn't open an office in a skyscraper. We converted the detached garage of my house, the same garage where I had hidden from Gavin under the SUV, into a private consulting firm. We didn't advertise. We didn't need to. Word spreads fast when you are the ones who can spot a wolf in sheep's clothing. We became the secret weapon for women who felt like they were losing their minds. We taught them how to check their bank statements, how to secure their digital footprints, how to trust their instincts when the world was telling them they were crazy. Tisha became the lead consultant. She used her medical background to help women recognize when they were being systematically sedated or manipulated. I handled the deep dives. I went back to my old roots using the codes and the contacts I had cultivated over 40 years to expose the Julians of the world before they could reach for a vial of potassium. We weren't just investigators anymore. We were guardians. There is a specific look in a woman's eyes when she realizes she isn't crazy, when she realizes the person she loves is actually her enemy. It is a look of pure, terrifying clarity. Every time I see it, I think of Tisha on that Vakda. Every time we help a woman escape a toxic situation, I feel a piece of Beatrice's soul resting easy. It has been 6 months since the trial. The city has moved on to other scandals, but for us, the healing is found in the work. Last Sunday, we did the one thing we had been putting off. We went to the cemetery. It was a beautiful morning, the kind of morning Beatrice loved. The air was crisp, and the dew was still on the grass. We didn't go to the formal plot in the center of the graveyard. We went to the quiet corner under the massive white oak tree, the one we had finally secured for her after the police released the silver jar. We had replaced the temporary marker with a solid slab of black granite. It didn't have a long poem or a list of titles. It just said Beatrice Duke, beloved wife and mother. She protected us until the end. Tisha knelt down and placed a bouquet of yellow roses on the grass. She stayed there for a long time, her hand resting on the stone. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just talking to her mother in the quiet way they always used to. I stood behind her, my hands clasped in front of me. I felt the weight of my years, but I didn't feel old. I felt like a man who had finished a long, hard journey and finally found his way home. I looked at my daughter, her shoulders square, her head held high, her eyes bright with purpose. She was no longer the girl who was afraid of her own shadow. She was a warrior. I stepped forward and placed my hand on Tisha's shoulder. I looked down at the granite and whispered into the wind. Beatrice, honey, the devil is finally locked up. Julian will never see a sunrise again. He will die in a cell surrounded by the silence he tried to impose on us. And look at our girl B. Look at what she has become. The monster tried to break her, but he only tempered the steel. Our daughter has become a warrior. She is saving people now. She is the light you always knew she would be. Tisha stood up and leaned her head against my arm. We stood there for a long time watching the sun climb higher in the sky. The shadows of the trees stretched long across the grass, but they didn't feel threatening anymore. They were just shadows. We walked back to the car together. Tisha's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. "It is a new client, Daddy," she said. "A woman in Richmond. She says her husband just took out a massive life insurance policy without telling her. She's scared." I opened the car door for her and smiled. "Well then," I said, "tell her not to worry. The Dukes are on the case." We drove away from the cemetery, leaving the dead to their peace. We had a living world to protect. And as I looked at Tisha, I knew that as long as we were standing, the wolves would never have a quiet night again. Betrayal is a fire that can either turn you into ash or forge you into something unbreakable. When the people you trust become the source of your danger, the only path to safety is the truth. Never be ashamed of being a victim, but never stay one. Your strength is not measured by how many times you were fooled, but by the courage it takes to stand up and fight back. True family is not just about the blood in your veins, it is about the people who will crawl through a dark basement and face a monster in the woods just to make sure you keep breathing. Trust your gut, watch the shadows, and remember that the light always wins as long as someone is brave enough to turn it on. Would you like me to start a new kitsch band with a different theme, or expand on a specific character's future? I am sitting in my study, the same room where I once spent countless nights tracking down embezzlers, arsonists, and professional liars. The lamp on my desk casts a warm yellow pool of light over the leather-bound journal I have kept for 4 decades. I call it the Book of Shadows. It is a record of every lie I have ever uncovered, every fraud I have exposed, and every monster I have ever helped put behind bars. But the last entry, the one titled Julian Slater, is the one that nearly cost me everything. I pick up my fountain pen, the ink flowing like a dark river onto the page. I write down the final details with a steady hand. The way the wind sounded on the cliff. The look in Tisha's eyes when she finally saw the truth. The way a multi-billion-dollar corporation protected its bottom line by saving a human life. It is done. Julian is in a 6x9 cell, stripped of his charm, his suits, and his stolen millions. He is exactly where a predator belongs. I have spent 72 years on this earth, and if there is one thing I have learned, it is that the most dangerous poison is not found in a laboratory. It is found in the heart of a person who uses your love as a doorway to your destruction. We are raised to believe that trust is the foundation of family, that blood is a bond that can never be broken. But my time in the trenches has taught me a harder truth. Trust is not a gift you give freely. It is a luxury you must afford only after verification. Blind trust is not love. It is a target painted on your back. It is the silence that allows the wolf to enter the fold. People ask me how I could be so cold to my own son-in-law. They ask how I could treat a marriage like an insurance claim. I tell them that family is not defined by a shared last name or a seat at the Thanksgiving table. Family is defined by the fierce, unwavering commitment to protect one another from the dangers of the world. If you are not protecting your family, you are just a stranger living in the same house. Julian Slater was never family. He was a parasite wearing a wedding ring. And the moment he touched my Beatrice, he forfeited any right to mercy. I look at the photos on my desk. Beatrice smiling in her garden. Tisha standing tall in our new office. We are the survivors. We carry the scars, but we also carry the wisdom. Tisha is no longer the girl who mopes in the shadows of a charming man. She is a duke. She understands now that the staff I carry is not just for walking. It is for defense. We have turned our pain into a shield for others. Every day, women come to us with that same look of doubt and fear in their eyes. We give them the tools to see clearly. We give them the power to say no. I close the journal. The heavy click of the cover feels like a period at the end of a long, bloody sentence. I lean back in my chair and rub my eyes. My bones ache and my ribs still stings when the weather turns cold. I tell myself that I am done. I tell Tisha that I am finally ready to retire to spend my days reading and watching the birds. I tell myself that the world is a safer place now that Julian is behind bars. But then I look out the window. The street is quiet, the suburban houses glowing with the soft blue light of television screens. Everyone is tucked in, feeling safe, feeling secure. But across the street, parked under the flickering streetlight, I see a black sedan. It has been there for an hour. The engine is off, but the driver hasn't stepped out. I see the faint glow of a cigarette. The windows are tinted too dark to see the face inside. I neo-map my eyes, narrowing. My heart rate doesn't go up. It settles into a cold, familiar rhythm. I know that car. Or rather, I know what that car represents. It represents the next person who thinks they can prey on the innocent. It represents a new shadow trying to creep into the light. I reach into my desk drawer. I don't pull out a gun. I pull out my camera with the long-range lens. I check the battery. Full. I reach for my coat and my cane. Retire, I whisper to the empty room. No, not today. And probably not tomorrow. As long as there are wolves, the shepherd cannot sleep. I walk to the front door, the heavy bolt sliding back with a satisfying metallic snap. I step out into the night air. The investigation is never truly closed. The screen fades to black. On the screen, in bold white text against the dark background, the final lesson begins to scroll upward as a deep, resonant voice reads with authority. We are taught that evil hides in shadows, in dark alleys, or in the faces of strangers. But the most dangerous monsters are the ones who smile at us across the dinner table. They wear expensive suits, speak with charm, and sleep in our beds. They don't break in. We invite them in. True protection isn't just a locked door. It's the courage to question what feels wrong, even when it comes from those we love. Trust is a luxury you must afford only after verification. In a world full of wolves wearing sheep's clothing, be the shepherd who carries a staff and knows how to use it. If you found strength in Harrison's story, don't let the message stop here. Like this video and subscribe to join our community of those who choose the truth over the lie. Leave a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. Have you ever had to stand up to a wolf in your own life? We want to hear your story. Your support helps us keep the light shining. Thank you for watching and stay vigilant.